7:15 p.m. on May 22nd of 2023, the annual town meeting for Dudley, Massachusetts is now called to order. Our requirement for quorum has been exceeded. As of 7:08, the count was approximately 250 registered voters for the town of Dudley, and as such, we may continue with our meeting. Any non-residents, guests, or visitors, if you are seated anywhere except the front couple of rows, down here on my right, we will need you to stand and make your way down front. The only exception to that are department heads and petitioners for articles who will be speaking this evening. You may be seated down here on my left. Only non-residents, the only non-residents permitted to speak tonight are department heads, town council, or others granted permission to attend for availability to address questions or comment on the articles, and seating for these individuals again is down here in these front rows. Okay. Thank you for joining us this evening. As a reminder, for decorum and procedure in accordance with the Town of Dudley bylaws governing our town meeting, all hats, head coverings must be removed for the duration of the meeting, with the exception of active duty military or other uniformed municipal or state officers. Please ensure that the hats remain off for the duration of our time together tonight. At this point, since we've called the meeting to order, we go ahead and ask you to stand to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in observing a moment of silence to reflect on all those who faithfully served our town as elected officials and employees who've dedicated time, effort, and energy to help make Dudley an outstanding town to reside in. Also, please reflect upon this coming Memorial Day, where we honor and recognize those who provided the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms that we enjoy, including the opportunity to be a part of town meeting. Thank you. We do have a number of procedural notes and reminders for this evening, and if needed, tomorrow evening. So please follow along. This is not by any means a cover-to-cover narrative of Robert's Rules of Order, nor our town bylaws governing town meeting, but it is some key information for those of you who have not participated in town meeting before, so you understand some of our procedures and protocols, so you may participate in an educated fashion. First and foremost, interruptions. If you have cell phones on or any device, please make sure that it's on silent at this point in time. If you must make a call, you must engage in dialogue other than related to town meeting, please excuse yourself into the cafeteria or someplace else that you may have a signal. Procedural rules are in accordance with the town bylaws and are available via the town clerk, the town website, public library. If you are in doubt on a specific point, you should consult the primary sources of authority, the Massachusetts general laws, the bylaws of the town of Dudley, and Robert's Rules of Order. We're going to go over some of those procedural guidelines in just a minute, some of the most important ones to attend to. If you do need to utilize the restrooms, those are located out in the cafeteria, the left-hand-most door at the back. Please make sure that you provide the clicker that you have for voting to an usher so that you may have one returned to you on your re-entry into the auditorium. Exiting in the case of an emergency this evening, there are doors at the back. The immediate right doors with the red exit sign head outside. These doors up top head out as well, if needed. Through unanimous consent, I request that clarification for a department or budget item or other article be required that employees or agents who are not residents but acting on behalf of the town of Dudley or petitioners of the article be permitted to speak. Are there any in opposition to allowing non-residents acting in that capacity to speak this evening? Thank you. Through unanimous consent, that will be permitted. And as a point of information, we do have town council down here in the front row, immediate left of me, Mr. Jeffrey Blake of KP Law. He may be consulted at times, and he may be requested to speak on points of law associated to any of our articles or motions. Any registered voter may speak to any article this evening, but all must speak politely and respectfully to other voters and members of town boards. Civility is not an option. While social media provides outlets for anyone to be sharp-tongued, it is imperative that we engage in productive presentation on perspectives this evening. Any violations of this expectation may result in the potential removal of a citizen from the town meeting floor. Steps that the chair will take for persons addressing the town meeting in an inappropriate manner: I will request that the person be silent unless given permission to speak. If that person continues to be disruptive after being warned, I will order that person to leave. And if the person refuses to leave, I will authorize a police officer to remove them. The police officers have authority to go through a 4-step process to engage citizens in town meeting. I will leave that up to the authority to explain that. I do expect decorum, and I do expect us to maintain a positive environment to share perspectives, whether we agree or disagree. Since many voters may wish to speak tonight, brevity of comment is much appreciated. In addition, speakers are encouraged to add new points to the debate as opposed to repeating what others have already stated. This is not always possible if we've prepared remarks ahead of time, but please be mindful that if we are hearing repeat statements from multiple voters, I may look to move you along in your commentary. To be recognized this evening, please stand at your seat and await my direction to approach the microphone in the middle aisle. If you are unable to do so, you have some type of physical disability or condition that will not allow you to make it to that microphone, please raise your hand. I will recognize you and we will get a microphone over to you so you can engage the town meeting tonight. When you do approach the microphone, you must identify yourself with first and last name and state your residence. Only residents of the town of Dudley will be allowed to speak in that forum. If you are speaking to multiple articles this evening, please state your name and address each time you speak. For those citizens of Dudley participating in the meeting from the cafeteria, please stand and wait at the entrance of the auditorium when directed by our assistant moderator for the evening. You will be admitted in and may approach the microphone when instructed. Our assistant moderator was called out of the bullpen from his retirement as town moderator. Mr. Patrick Flynn is helping us out this evening, and I really do appreciate his availability out there. During debate, you must speak only to the issues. If I determine the comments are not germane to the issues, I will interrupt and instruct you to move on or conclude your remarks. You may not make personal remarks about others or impugn their motives. You may not cheer or cheer points made by members of the public or town officials. That would violate our expectation of civility and decorum. Except for the petitioner and certain town officials, you may only speak twice to a motion, and your comments are limited to a specific time limit of 2 minutes with some latitude at my discretion. All questions must be addressed through the chair. If you do ask a question, you do not lose the floor, and the answer from officials or council is not counted as part of your speaking time. Due to the length of the warrant, we will be limiting questions and comments to roughly 15 minutes per article this evening, with exception. This limit will not be impacted by time to address questions or provide clarification. I will provide latitude based on hands raised and interest in speaking to unique points. So while we are looking at a 15-minute, no worries, folks who have something to say will be permitted to say it. Voters may speak to an issue more than once, but generally, first-time speakers will be recognized before repeaters, and repeaters will only be allowed if time permits. Remember to listen closely to the motion as stated. The motion puts the warrant article in play, and it is the motion that is voted on, not the article as written in the warrant. However, there should be a strong similarity between the motion and the article. Most motions must be seconded. Seconding motions is an easy way for newcomers to participate in the meeting. One does not even need to stand or be directly recognized. Generally, calling out second at the right time will suffice. The primary method of voting will be through the use of the clicker system. Voting may be done by voice if needed, aka technology fails tonight, which I don't think it will. No, Olivia assures me it won't. But as the moderator's hearing fails, standing counts may be taken in the event that tech fails. The last resort due to time constraints is to take a counted vote by paper ballot. We will have a tutorial on the use of the clicker system in a few moments at the conclusion of the procedural remarks. In the event of failed technology and a voice vote, standing count or ballot count is necessary. Although it's not encouraged, the moderator's judgment can be questioned as to the accuracy of the vote as announced. If 7 people request a recount of vote of a voice or standing vote, that shall be done. The moderator will generally accept the motion to move the previous question, or more easily understood, to cut off debate. Many people think this motion is somewhat unfair, but it has been my experience that more often than not, it is passed unanimously or by overwhelming numbers. In the event that a question is, in the situation where a motion is move the previous question, that does require a 2/3 vote. After a motion has been made and seconded, the mover of the motion speaks first, followed by the appropriate town boards or officials, generally the selectmen or the Finance, Appropriations, and Advisory Committee, who state their opinions. The motion is then available for discussion, pro, con, or questions. Other than when seconding a motion or requesting a point of order, speakers must be recognized by the moderator before they launch into a point or question. For the most part, this rule of the road is rigorously enforced, and I appreciate your attention to that. That covers the important procedural background for the annual town meeting of Dudley. It does not educate us all in the ways of all that we need to know about Robert's Rules of Order, but it gives us just enough to get this show rolling. As a reminder to the citizens of Dudley, June 6th of 2023 is the candidates' night in advance of the annual town election that is being held on June 12th of 2023. I'd encourage you to tune in or join us at the municipal complex on the 3rd floor for June 6th candidates' night to hear what those on the ballot have to say and provide to the town of Dudley. At this time, I request the town clerk, Mrs. Smith, to dispense with the reading of the warrant and certify the delivery.
Either of the constables of the town of Dudley, in said county, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are hereby directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of the town of Dudley qualified to vote in election and town affairs to meet in the Connie Vanco Galley Auditorium at Shepherd Hill Regional High School, 68 Dudley Oxford Road, in said Dudley on Monday, May 22nd, 2023, and or Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023, if needed, and other such times as may be voted, if needed, at 7 p.m., then and there to take action on the following articles.
Thank you. And can you certify the delivery of the warrant?
We are hereby directed to serve this warrant by posting attested copies thereof at the Dudley Municipal Center and on the Town of Dudley website, and by posting notice of availability of the warrant on one cable access channel. Warrant to be posted at least 7 days before holding of said meeting. Hereof fail not and make due return of this warrant with your doing thereon to the town clerk at the time of holding of said meeting. Given under our hands this 8th day of May in the year 2023. Jason Johnson, Chairman. John Marcy, Vice Chairman. Carrie Sigadnevich, Clerk. Stephen Sullivan. Mark Landry, Board of Selectmen. I have notified and warned the inhabitants of the town of Dudley by posting up attested copies of the same at the Dudley Municipal Center on the 12th of May, 2023. I also observed and posted on the town's website and notice of availability on the Dudley Cable Access Channel on the 12th of May, 2023. Hereby making my return to the Dudley Town Clerk on the 12th of May, 2023. Jonathan Ruda, Constable, Town of Dudley.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Before we get into the clicker system, again, I just want to again thank Mr. Patrick Flynn for assisting in the role of moderator in the cafeteria overflow space. For point of information, Board of Selectmen Chairperson Jason Johnson, he'll be commenting on articles and making motions on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. And over to the left-hand side of me, Finance Appropriations Advisory Committee member John Curry will be speaking on behalf of FAA this evening. So the clicker system, those of you who haven't been to town meeting in a while, and my guess is there's a couple of you in the audience because I've never seen you in here before. We adopted the clicker system a couple of years ago, and it allows us to have very accurate, very quick return on our votes, and doesn't have me worry about hearing or doing a physical count out in the area. A couple of things about this clicker system. First and foremost, there's a antenna right up here of us. That is something that those of you in the back, if you like to keep your hands low behind the seats, we would like you to pick that clicker up and enter your selection for your vote choice. So there's a clear path to this antenna. That will eliminate the delay that some of us have experienced in the past, and it will also go ahead and avoid you from getting a red light that looks like your vote wasn't tallied. We'll go ahead and practice that in just a moment. There are a couple of things to know about the keypad. To vote yes, we vote 1 or A, and to vote no, we vote 2 or B. None of the other buttons register as a vote. There is no other. We must make choices this evening. That's why we're here. If you push the wrong button, no worries. There's a timer on the screen. As that timer counts down to 0, you may change your vote if needed. So if you really wanted to vote no on an article and you hit A1, you have until the timer is expired to change that vote. Okay, response cards only work in this meeting. They will not work at home. They will not work with any devices. Please make sure you return them on your way out this evening. There will be a box and ushers will track you down in the parking lot. Not true, but they may. Okay. So, a successful vote, green light in 1A on the LCD screen. A successful no vote is a green light and 2B on the LCD screen. And a vote not registered after you push the button shows up as a red light and you'll see a line through it. Okay? So let's go ahead and see if we can do our test question. Is today, Monday, May 22 of 2023? Enter 1 for yes or 2 for no. If you do notice, if you want to try and change your vote, you may. And you'll notice the timer counting down. You should be able to see that from the back. I tested it without my glasses earlier. And our results, excellent, excellent. I am in the 8.58%. I did answer no, just to test to make sure this was working properly. So thanks to those of you who joined me in that as well. Do we have other test questions? No? Okay, we don't have any other test questions. Are there any questions on the use of the clicker system? All right, well, let's get down to business then. Article 1, Town Reports. To see if the town will vote to receive the reports of the several town officers and all committees or take any other action relative thereto.
I move to approve Article 1 as recommended by the FAA and as printed in the warrant.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on Article 1? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote on Article 1. 1A is yes, 2B is no. Passes clearly with a large majority. Article 2, hear committee recommendations. To hear and act on the recommendations of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance, Appropriation, and Advisory Committee, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Curry.
I move to approve Article 2 as recommended by the FAA and as printed in the warrant.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion on Article 2. Seeing none, call this Article 2 a vote. 1A, yes. 2B, no. Article passes with the majority. Article 3, FY 2024 budget, to see if the town will vote to determine the sums of money the town will raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds to defray the charges and expenses of the town and provide for a reserve fund, determining the compensation for elected offices and including debt and interest for the ensuing fiscal year beginning on July 1, 2023, with the amount shown in the column captioned non-contingent appropriations be appropriated from the tax levy unless otherwise specified for fiscal year 2024 departmental operating purposes, debt service, and other town expenses, and that the amount shown in the column captioned contingent appropriations be appropriated from the tax levy contingent upon the passage of a Proposition 2.5 ballot question pursuant to General Law, Chapter 59, Section 21C, G. Mr. Curry.
I move that the town appropriate the total sum of $25,182,809 to fund the town's budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023, including a portion of its assessment for the Dudley Charlton Regional School District, for the purposes and amounts listed and with the funding sources as printed in Article 3 under the column titled Non-Contingent Appropriations, and further to raise and appropriate the supplemental sum of $2,668,797 for purposes of operational expenses of the town and the Dudley Charlton Regional School District, and the amounts listed and printed in Article 3 under the column titled Contingent Appropriations, said supplemental amount to be subject to the passage of a so-called Proposition 2.5 override ballot question pursuant to General Law, Chapter 59, subsection 21C, G.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there discussion on Article 3? Yes, ma'am. Please state your name and address for the record.
Robin Watson, Dresser Hill Road, Dudley. I have one question before I make my comments for discussion. If the permanent Proposition 2.5 18.11% rate increase is approved, how are the funds allocated in year 2? Will that money assumed to be for the schools in year 1 continue to go to the schools, or will it go to the town stability fund?
Thank you, Mr. Ruda.
So again, in year 2, this town meeting can vote any way it wishes to spend those funds. However, it's very unlikely that the school assessment, will reduce, and you don't need to apply those funds anyway. There's no educational stabilization fund being thought of or formed as it was with the first override question. Is that your specific question?
Well, my specific question is, this year, if you're asking for 900-something thousand for the schools, and this is approved, will they get that same amount of money in year 2?
It's more than likely, and history shows that they will get that amount of money and more. Likely that amount plus 2.5% on top of it.
Okay, and then I have several points of discussion on the town budget as well as the school budget, and then I'm going to make a move to amend. Right, on the town accountant, I'd like to know why a town accountant needs an assistant at $55,000 a year.
Would you like to take these questions just in order as you present them?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Ruda?
The town accountant deals with $20 million annually by herself, 32 hours a week. She needs an assistant.
I'm a project manager. I deal with multiple millions of dollars per project myself, so I know one person is capable of that. Number 2, Board of Assessors, computer line item, $12,898. Is that for one PC, a server, multiple PCs? It's very expensive if it's one PC. And is that state funded?
Mr. Moderator, if we're going to go through line by line, I would ask that we direct it to the department heads of the
Yeah, that's fair, Mr. Ruda. Member of the Board of Assessors. Next question.
No one's here to answer that. Town treasurer, there's been new...
Oh, we do have a member of the Board of Assessors. Oh, there we go. That's good. Ms. Watson, could you state your first name again, please?
Robin,
Thank you.
Lisa Berg, Principal Assessor. That $12,000 is our appraisal software, our mapping company. And it's all computer software maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Next question is for the town treasurer. There's been numerous fact sheets that have been updated repeatedly in the past couple of weeks on the website. One fact sheet stated that the collector clerk position of $51,445 was eliminated, but I still see that in the budget. How many assistants does this tax collector require?
Mr. Kamiani?
Good evening, Rich Carmignani, 49 Airport Road. The position, when it was combined into a single treasurer collector, had an assistant collector, it had an assistant treasurer, and it had a less than 20-hour-a-week clerk. Right now, there's 2 people sitting in the office, one of them is here. So it's a matter of, there should be 2, an assistant and a cross-trained, in addition to the month of March is probably the single largest revenue month. Does that answer your question?
So we just lost one of your employees. You announced it recently.
Correct. Correct.
Is that position still listed in the town budget?
It's the contingent, the non-contingent is 50%. With a successful override, it gets restored to the full 40 hours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Under general fund, there's maturing debt, $961,687, and interest debt of $212,754. Do those represent the debt that's being retired for the town hall building, or is this something else?
Mr. Kamiani?
Okay. Correct. So the last payment has been made on the town hall. The town hall had 2 issuances. The last payment was made in December of 2022.
Okay, so what's the remaining maturing debt that's on our budget line?
Excuse me, Ms. Watson and Mr. Kamiani, we need the entire public in
I
the
would
meeting.
like to know if the maturing debt amount and the interest debt that remains on the budget is above and beyond what we just paid off for the town hall. Yes or no?
While Mr. Kamiani is approaching the mic, if the members of the public at the back can go ahead and take your seat, with the exception of our town election officials. So those of you who aren't involved in the administration of the town meeting, please find a seat. Those of you viewing at home haven't lost audio right now. We are just working through some paperwork to get an answer to a question. So you know. I received a text. Sure. Let's move on with the next question that you have, Ms. Watson.
Okay. Just a couple more questions on the town. There's a Quinn bill for police department training, pay and incentives, $149,300. And I believe on the budget, it says it's state reimbursed. Have they reimbursed us that much money, or are we being asked to pay for that?
Chief Carlitz?
Chief Karlowitz, also resident. The Quinn bill is basically an education incentive. It's just labeled as a Quinn bill. Quinn bill disappeared. The state stopped funding that years back. We still submit for reimbursement. Over that one day, the state will give us a huge check for millions of dollars for reimbursement. But it's based on contract. It's an incentive for the officers to go out and get their associate's degree, bachelor's degree, and master's degree. We want, in this day and age, to have educated officers. And if you look around most towns, that's the incentive for having educated officers.
Thank you.
I don't object for the education. I'm wondering if the state has reimbursed us.
Yeah, state has not reimbursed us for at least 10 years now. They stopped the Quinn bill, and we adopted the education incentive. So we still submit to the state for the Quinn bill in hopes that we get reimbursed, but there has been $0 coming back from the state in the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Okay, under the general fund, there's a career education incentive of $68,000. What type of education is required for the municipal employees that this would be given to?
Chief?
That should be listed under the fire department. That's contracted education incentive for the paramedic recertification for my members.
Okay, thank you. Veteran services, there's a $150,000 line item for veterans benefits listed as covered by the state, and yet there's a $10,861 amount on this town's budget. And I'll move along to the library. The library is listed as being funded by the state, so I'd like to know why $49,000 is out our town budget for the library. The library is open 45 hours a week. I see on the line item detailed budget that there's one full-time aide. I think there's a child librarian, a head librarian, and approximately five part-time workers. Could any of those part-time workers be combined into one or two positions, thereby reducing benefits for part-time employees at the library? Something to consider. You don't need to answer. And finally, I would like to move to amend Article 3 by reducing the total general fund amount of $1,674,515 by $179,306 to a total ask of $1,495,209, which is a 10.7 decrease from the requested amount, and by reducing the Dudley Charlton regional override amount of $994,282 by $263,964 to a total of $730,318.
Motion's been made. Motion's been seconded. In the event that we do have an amendment, we do have a discussion to ensue on the amendment on the floor, and then we will move that to a vote. Ms. Watson, would you like to make any statements relative to your amendment?
All of my questions were calculated to come up with the numbers that I just proposed in my amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Ruda? Blake?
Mr. Moderator, I'm just wondering if Mrs. Watson has a list of those sources of funding that she could provide.
The source of the funding I provided came from all of the questions that I just asked.
Mr. Moderator, to make an amendment on the floor like that, I'd give list and an amount for the source of the funding. And I think, Mr. Moderator, would be a good idea for us to hear from town council in terms of how that impacts the ballot question on June 12th.
Agreed. Please, Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, my name is Jeffrey Blake. I'm here from KP Law, your town council. Thanks, everybody, for having me. The question, there were a couple of comments made by your town administrator. First of all, when you make a motion to amend, you would need to, and frankly, I wasn't able to write down your motion fast enough, but usually when there's a dollar figure attached to a motion, there has to be a funding source. If you're reducing certain line items, then at that point, I would suspect that your funding source is the same, but you're just simply reducing it. With respect to lowering the amount of a contingent figure as you have done, as you probably know, the ballot, there's a ballot question at town that will go before the town. I believe it's on June 12th. In order for a Prop 2.5 override to move forward, you have to have two things. You have to have an appropriation at town meeting, and you have to have a 2.5 override ballot question approved. As the ballots have already been printed, there's a certain dollar amount in there. In the event that you reduce the dollar figure here at the meeting, that would not have been appropriated. So the likely effect of that will be that the override will be reduced.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Yes, Mr. Fox.
My name is Peter Fox, 12 Ridge Drive, Dudley. I'd like to ask Mr. Carmignani if he would help me a little bit with my question. If the town hall debt is now being paid and paid off, that would reduce the tax rate because the debt's paid, the tax rate would go down. So if this article were to pass, that would offset the cost of the next increase. I want to know if I'm saying that correctly with Mr. Carmignani.
Mr. Carmignani.
Good evening. The previous speaker is referring to the town hall debt. There were two issuances. The way the tax rate has been calculated, the debt excluded item sits on top until the issuance is paid. When the issuance is paid, that amount is reduced. The $463,000 in an upcoming article is being proposed as a debt exclusion. My conversation with the previous speaker was, we're taking $389,000 off, and we're proposing to put $463,000 on, which would be an increase in the tax rate of $74,000 or so. I have the numbers here. Does that answer the question? So it's a modest increase for the 463.
Thank you.
That's very important to understand because there's an opportunity here that doesn't come up very often where we have a tax rate that's able to go down and offset another tax rate and reduce the amount that will be paid by the taxpayers.
Mr. Flynn next.
Patrick Flynn, 43 Lions Road. Just a question, did we open discussion on the amendment yet, or are we still talking about the article?
That's where we were going after Mr. Fox's question. I was going to pull us back. I was hoping you were going to ask about the amendment.
Thank you.
We're discussing if we are going to amend the budget as it was presented by Ms. Watson.
Thank you. Can I comment on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I can appreciate the comments on the budget. In this town, when we vote for our officials, we can vote for library trustee. Did you know that? Do you know you can actually run for that position? It has a 0 next to it when we actually have a ballot vote. And those are usually write-ins. As voters, we entrust these folks here, as well as the other people, to hire the department heads, to hire your chief of police, to hire everybody that comes up with this budget. And to come here tonight and try to second guess that at this stage of the game, it's just not right. You've had a year to make all these, or 6 months, whatever you want to say, to have all of these questions, all of these inputs made. Show up then. Run for something. You have an expertise, give it to the town. They're begging for it. I used to sit it there. I would beg for people to fill positions that could not be filled. And so what I'm saying is some of these things are not just solved in a 5-minute discussion here at town meeting. For example, the Quinn bill, which is an unfunded mandate. We are required by union contract, I'm assuming, to pay for that education. We hire an officer, we make them a promise. If you go to school, we're going to pay for it. At one point in time, the state said, we'd pay you for that. Guess what? The state didn't. You don't like it? Call your state rep. Give them a call. You don't like the way the budget comes down from them? Talk about bus funding. Call your state rep. You don't like that? Call Jim McGovern's office. He has a phone line. Call your federal rep, your congressman. Don't do it here to town meeting, to people who need the funds, who rely on the funds. Okay? I would strongly urge we vote no on this amendment, and let's get back to the regular article and have discussion on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Senator Riley.
First of all, before I give my planned remarks, I do want to say I second everything
Just
you did.
state your name and address, please.
Colin Humphreys, 10 Lakeside Drive. Sorry. So before I get started, I do want to second everything he just said. I previously served as the student rep to the Board of Selectmen. I've worked alongside a lot of these people, selectmen, department heads. I've seen how we operate, and I trust these people to do a good job. They always do. But on that note, right now, the reason we're having an override is because we're already coming up short on our funding. We are at risk of losing as many as 30 teachers, some of our athletics programs. We're at risk of losing our music and arts, and we're at risk of losing a lot of our town services. Positions at the town hall might be cut, services are being cut. Right now, the last thing we need, and this is not necessarily about the override, we'll decide that on June 12th, but the last thing we need right now is to cut funds further, especially, when we can't come up with a full list of where these cuts are coming from. I trust these individuals up here to make the right decisions regarding the operating budget, and ultimately, I urge everyone to vote no on this, because it would be devastating to our town to cut funds from the already low position that we're at. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Humphries. Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Stephen Sullivan, Cardinal Drive, Board of Selectmen. To the speaker who is proposing the amendment, I think there's some confusion as to your numbers and what you want to cut. But a veterans agent is not, a veteran service officer is not here tonight. I'm not a veteran. I'm the son of a veteran. I serve. Mr. Landry's a veteran. One of the ones you talked about was veteran services reimbursement. It's somewhere around 80% of the amount that we pay out in benefits we get reimbursed. Our veterans agent is budgeted for 20 hours? Yeah, 20 hours a week. We have other veterans that help him do paperwork. If he was here, he would tell you, and I would wholeheartedly agree, he works well over 20 hours a week. I agree with the previous speaker, this amendment should be soundly defeated for all the reasons given, including, and agreeing with the speaker in the green, we've had public hearings, public meetings, the schools, and it's been uptick lately, which is great. I always want more people to participate. But to literally get up on the town meeting floor to amend it, and one of the ones you want to amend is veteran services reimbursements, right there should tell people this should be defeated on the spot.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Let's see again. All right, seeing no additional discussion, we'll go ahead and move this amendment to a vote.
Further discussion, I would
Go ahead, approach the mic. Missed your hand, sorry.
Hi, my name is Greg Chojnacki. I live on Eagle Drive. I represent a small group of people. We call ourselves Dudley Patriots. And we have a lot of questions. Last month, people voted down almost 3-1 to no override to make a proposition. Why you start again? I told you last time.
Point of order is noted. This is discussion about the amendment to the budget as presented, not about the override.
I know you're asking for more money again. You cannot use credit card for so long, so many years. You borrow every year more. Well, what's it about us small people? We have to pay more taxes. I have one more personal question. We have some people, part-time people. Do you pay for their health insurance?
So again, I'm going to bring this back to the discussion about the amendment. There's nothing in our amendment values that were voted, or even instructed towards health insurance costs.
I like to use my 2 minutes for asking for that.
I'm going to end that now, though, because we're on the amendment conversation. We're not on the budget line.
This is budget, but...
So if you could go ahead, back to your seat, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Rudin?
One of the, and I appreciate Mr. Flynn and a few other speakers that came up. Mr. Sullivan came up and put this a little bit more in perspective. One of the reasons that we have a bottom line budget as opposed to going through it line item by line item is just that. We have department heads that go through it line item by line item. For example, career education incentive in the fire department, well, that keeps the paramedics certified. They come to your house. That's not a place where you want to cut. There are other places you might want to cut, but that's not a place you want to cut. It's also a collective bargaining agreement. It's an impact bargaining situation. So if we were to cut that specific line item, we'd be back at the table with the union trying to figure out how to make them whole. So that cut would actually end up probably costing us more money. And the same would happen with the Quinn bill. It's an education incentive. The state pulled the rug out from underneath us, Chief, 10 years ago? Approximately 10 years ago, so we're on the hook for it. So if we pull away that incentive, which is contained in their contract, it's an impact bargaining event. We have to go back and we have to make the union whole. So that savings that we thought we'd realize by pulling the rug out from underneath our police officers would go out and get an education, and we pay them accordingly, like in any other place. If you have a higher level of education or the job requires it, you get paid more for it. We pull that away from them. We have to still go back and have an impact bargaining session to make them whole. Veterans benefits, one of the suggestions was to cut that. As Mr. Sullivan just said, 80% reimbursable. Why would we cut out veterans when it's 80% reimbursable from the Commonwealth? We get very little money from the Commonwealth. Why would we bite off our noses and spite our faces by cutting veterans' benefits of all things? There's a reason why we do it as a bottom line situation. There's a reason why we have 6 months of budget hearings. This is not the forum to do that. It's a bottom line budget situation.
Thanks, Mr. Ruda. Yes? Sorry, you're down to the first couple of rows. Registered voter?
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Joe Cermiak, 25 D'Alessandro Ave. I just wanted to have something to add to the woman that was trying to make the amendment or whatever here. When she's coming up there saying that things that are written down here incorrectly, well, who's double checking, triple checking those numbers to make sure that information is correct? Who's triple checking that? Because she's finding different people are sitting down in here on their own time, finding things that don't jive on there. So I say, who's triple checking this before it gets handed out? So you can have the answers when people ask the questions. You know, somebody has to have the answers to this. You can't just sit there and say, I don't know, do you know? I don't know, maybe he knows. Somebody has to know something.
So the answer to that question is the town treasurer, town accountant, board of selectmen, town manager, town council, FAA, all have open public discussions along with the school department related to every budget line item that is there. The numbers are checked multiple times, and if there are specific questions that haven't yet been answered this evening, I'm sure that we can answer them, but from where I've been sitting, they have been addressed.
All right, I'm just saying that somebody's saying that the numbers are incorrect. I don't go to that. I don't know. That's all
A lot of things can be said.
Yeah, I'm just asking. This is my first time being legally here to vote, so.
No, I appreciate you being here and approaching.
You're gonna see me every time too.
All right, thank you.
I tell you, we can cut some fat off of this. There's a book from 2 years ago. Everybody in this town gets paid, right? There's a book that the town hands out that tells everybody's pay on here, right?
Thank you.
So, there is stuff that can be cut.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, we'll go ahead and move the amendment to a vote. This is a majority vote. A 1 is to amend as presented, and a 2 is a no, which reverts back to our original motion. Go ahead and call for that vote. Once again, a 1 is a yes to amend, a 2 is a no to maintain the original motion. That motion to amend has failed. We return back to our original motion and discussion. Yes, Mrs. Carmignani.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen Carmignani. Mr. Starcheski, am I allowed to face the town people?
Yeah, as school committee chair, yeah, why don't you come up to this podium, please?
Good evening. As I said, my name is Kathleen Carmignani. I'm 49 Airport Road, and I am the chair of the school committee. I'd like to have a brief statement for you. Good evening again. I stand before you today with grave concern that affects each and every one of us. Our town services, and more importantly, our school services, are facing a critical threat. It is imperative that we come together and support the contingent budget and subsequent override. A no vote on either would lead to a devastating decrease to over $2 million of our school budget, with catastrophic consequences for our children's education and our town services. First and foremost, let us recognize the fundamental importance of education in shaping the future of our community. Our schools are not merely buildings, they are beacons of knowledge, guiding our children towards a brighter tomorrow. They foster growth, inspire creativity, and provide the necessary foundation for success. By slashing the school budget, we would undermine the very fabric of our town, jeopardizing our children's education and their future prospects. Many of you and your children have prospered from our schools, and we must continue to allow the next generation to have the same opportunities. Consider for a moment the ramification of $2 million decrease in our town budget. It would lead to overcrowded classrooms, limited resources, and outdated materials. Our dedicated teachers who work tirelessly to provide the best education possible would be forced to do even more with even less. We cannot allow this to happen. Our children deserve a quality education that prepares them for the challenges and opportunities of this world. Moreover, let us not forget the impact of this decrease on our town services. Our fire departments, police departments, public works, and other essential services rely on adequate funding to ensure the safety, well-being, and smooth functioning of our community. A decrease in the budget would mean reduced staffing, longer response times, and compromised services. It would put the safety and security of our citizens at risk. While we understand the financial considerations are always part of decision-making, we must weigh the long-term benefit against short-term inconveniences. Investing in our children's education and maintaining essential town services is an investment in the prosperity and vitality of our community. It is an investment in our property values, our quality of life, and the future of our town. We have the power to make the difference. By supporting the contingent budget and subsequent override, we can safeguard our children's, and for some of you, your grandchildren's, education and preserve the integrity of our town services. We must come together, united in our belief that our children's education and the well-being of our community are worth fighting for. I implore each and every one of you to cast your vote in favor of this budget. Let us demonstrate our commitment to the future of our town, to the well-being of our children, and the strength of our community. Thank you for your attention, and may we stand strong and united as we move forward.
Hold that applause, thank you. Yes, up in the, yeah.
My name is Kathy Hurst from 15 Camelot Circle in Dudley. I don't know if I have to go through the chair for this, but my question is more about the school budget at this point. I do remember that the new numbers that are coming in this article for the school budget is lower because the capital expenditure for the roof repair has been deferred to FY '25. So that's what the lower number was from. I don't believe there have been any other changes, cuts or deductions as far as the amount of money that was being asked for. I just would like to point out, I had been at the school committee meetings and I asked a question about the ESSER funding, and that is the elementary and secondary schools emergency relief fund that the schools have received. And I had asked if, what was it used for, how much did you receive? And I went to a site where I received the information that I got was the government listing and what each town received and in what year. I'm going to go backwards because the ESSER 3 funding was done in 2022. The Dudley Charlton Regional School District received $2,519,086. And I went to the Dudley Charlton Regional website and I did see their plan where this money did go. And I'll try to just summarize it. There was over $121,000 for a director of public facilities and HVAC needed repairs. The big amount was $1.546,318 for unfinished learning. And that included academic support, instruction materials, remedial programs, but it also created positions to support academic areas. There's also professional development, textbooks, and so on. Then there was over $385,000 for nurses, a special ed director, team chair, and office support. And lastly, there was $465,000 that added 3 additional adjustment counselors for social emotional support. Totaling those all up, you came to the $2,519,086. My question is, through the school committee or the chair, or someone to tell me what happened to the ESSER money that was received in 2021. It came in 2 increments as the original ESSER of $300,000, and additional ESSER 2, $1,089,000 and $272. $1,089,272. And I couldn't account for or see any plan of action where that was. I did see what we have in front of us, our numbers, but we don't actually have a line-by-line item of where these funds went. This was just an outline. My question would be, where were those monies used? How much is left over? And if any of those positions that were added during that time when it was a temporary relief funding program from the government that we knew it was going to end, are any of those positions trying to be funded, continuing with our own money in the town?
So in some prior fiscal year's ESSER funds, what's the status of those funds? And when the positions were created using those funds, are those in the appropriated FY24 budget request? That's essentially the question, because I'm not going to go into all the numbers and ask a line-by-line account of any member of our school
I'm not
department.
asking for that. I just wondered what happened to that other, it was a total of $1,389,272 that wasn't accounted for.
Superintendent Lamache?
And I just want to add this too. I know that one of the last meetings that I was at,
Pardon me, Ms. Hurst, let's give Superintendent Lamache an opportunity to address the question, and then if you need to have a clarification statement, I'll allow it, but you're going to be at your time.
Through the moderator, I don't have FY21 and 24. As you may have researched, this has been spread out over 3 years, and you have the FY24 expenditures moving forward. That was in the presentation that you were able to see, and you did reference it pretty well. It represents a little over $1 million of funding for 1 more year. It all ends in FY24, so we are faced with a funding cliff for some of this, but the staff members who were part of this particular grant program are fully aware of that. Keep in mind, this ESSER money came out as we were coming out of COVID, so yes, when you refer that we added additional nursing support, yes, we did. We truly did. That's what we spent the money on. We also spent it on our facilities, to have our facilities up to speed when it comes to HVAC and et cetera. You mentioned the Director of Public School Facilities who's saving you hundreds of thousands of dollars and acting as the owner's project manager for the 2 roof projects within the 2 communities at this point in time. Literally saving us hundreds of thousands of dollars so that we don't have to go out and buy or hire an owner's project manager. We've had occupational therapists. We've expressed at our meetings over and over again, the needs of our students have been exacerbated coming out of COVID, and this is what the ESSER funds were supposed to do, to address those additional needs that we wouldn't have had prior to COVID. So yes, a little over $1 million for FY24. You have $220,000 for paraprofessionals to support students, typically individual students with specific needs. You have $240,000 in school adjustment counselors, which again provides us the opportunity when we look at if we have to have a level funded budget to reduce our budget with school adjustment counselors, because we do have some additional through the ESSER funds for 1 more year, meaning that we will have to come back the following year and look for more support probably. Also supporting an 18 to 22 postgraduate program. Those are our students who were given the opportunity to continue their education because they lacked some of it through COVID, through some of that real life experience. So we did support a teacher in that. And yes, support for a special education coordinator, because once again, our student needs are exploding coming out of COVID. It was not a relief for our staff. It was actually more work required. So that's FY24. It was in the presentation. I appreciate that you were able to look at it. But the ESSER money for the school district was spread out over 3 years. Next year is the last year for use of that funds.
I understand that, but what...
Thank you, Ms. Hurst. Last thought?
The amount that I was asking for is the amount that came in 2021. That's, I can see where everything went with the 2022 ESSER funds, but I didn't really see where the 2021 was. In fact, the 2022, it was down to the dollar amount where it was allotted. But I'm starting to ask my last question before Mr. Lamarche came up to speak. And that was during our last public school committee meeting where the budget was discussed. And there were a couple mentions, and I wondered if anything changed since that time, because the budget numbers that you're showing this evening are the same exact ones that were presented during the school committee meeting. And the school committee was supposed to meet again to go over their numbers to see where additional cuts might be made. And this was including discussions of what was going to happen with kindergarten, whether it was going to be full day, half days for one section, and so on. And it was recommended by different people that perhaps, for instance, the assistant superintendent position would have saved 130 some odd thousand. And
So,
also,
Ms. Harris, just to clarify, that committee meeting wasn't to look at additional cuts, it was to look at a number that was going to be reduced, and they were talking about positional changes to arrive at that value, not additional positions.
I was there, I'm not talking about additional. I'm talking about, I was at that meeting, and they said that they were going to meet again before this meeting to see if perhaps that position could be cut to save money. And there's also over $400,000 going to stipends that might have been looked at. And I just wondered if there was any discussion, any movement on that that would have reduced the budget number that we see in Article 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Lamarche.
Through the moderator, I'm not sure that it was said that there was going to be a meeting before this meeting. I know the school committee has a meeting Wednesday night, and they have asked us as administrators to come back with as we presented, a level-funded budget plan, which entails around $2 million in reductions. And there was support to say that we did not want particular things. School committee did not take action that evening, but we will come in with other reductions to offset other reductions. It's not to increase the reductions. And I just want to remind you and the public that the $994,000 that's represented here is based off of the House numbers. The Senate has yet to come out with their numbers. The Senate Ways and Means has a little bit of a different twist to their numbers compared to the House. But the House numbers came out with very favorable numbers, and that's what we base this request off of, is the House numbers. That could change, but we are assuming that risk. There's a lot of risk involved in all of this, but we're assuming that. But again, I'm not clear that the school committee said they were going to have a meeting before this meeting. But they are having a meeting Wednesday night to go over again the level-funded budget plan and what that would look like in the event that there is no contingent budget. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Chief Carlitz.
Just real quick, 20 years ago, we had 16 full-time officers in the town.
Yes, please, face the audience. It's a little uncomfortable there.
About 20 years ago, we had 16 full-time officers in the town of Dudley. That was when I got hired. Shortly afterwards, within the first 5 years, we lost 5 positions. We were down to 11 full-time officers. Since then, it took us 15 years to recoup what we had 20 years ago. Back in February, in January, I got promoted to chief. My first task was to come up with a budget, 10% cut for the budget. I had to walk up to 2 officers and basically tell them that they might be cut. All the progress we've made in the last couple of years, we might be going backwards. Now with maybe deeper cuts, it might be even more. My point of this is you have a police department that is dedicated to this town. We have a lot invested in this town. Our kids go to this town. We rely on the fire department. We rely on the highway department. And as a taxpayer and a citizen, I'm very proud of our town services. I just feel that if we don't get the appropriate funding, you're going to see the town going backwards. And just to give you a quick, the last 2 months, the town of Southbridge has seen 4 gun calls in the last 2 months. Town of Webster, 2 gun calls. We had 2 gun calls. We had 1 incident near Nichols College where we responded to a disturbance. one of our reserve officers didn't even know what he was chasing the car for, he was just fleeing the scene, was involved in a shooting right outside Nichols College. He was chasing a car that had a loaded firearm at $19 an hour. That's what we pay our reserves, $19 an hour. And then shortly afterwards, we found an individual on Green Street with an illegal firearm. Town of Oxford just had an officer involved shooting last week. I believe if we reduce funding to the police department, it's going to put the, not just the town, but our officers in jeopardy. And for everybody's support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Fox.
My name is Peter Fox, 12 Ridge Drive, Dudley. I consider this budget and this request much more reasonable and workable than the last budget that got defeated, the override that got defeated. I think it's very important that we move forward and support this article. With the reduction of the bill being paid for town hall, which will also lower the tax rate, it will help offset some of the increase that's here. I urge the voters to support this article.
Thank you.
Dean Kochanowski, Dudley Fire Chief. I just wanted to piggyback off what the police chief said. If this doesn't pass, I have a couple of groups now that only have 2 guys on shift at once. I've had to cut my overtime budget by $25,000. I don't even have enough in that line to pay for it now. When somebody on those two-man groups is off, no matter when it is, I have to backfill that. You can't run an ambulance, a car, or anything with one guy on duty. And as some of you can attest to firsthand, the ambulance has been critical in saving lives, especially recently in town. So I would strongly suggest you support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. Good. New speaker at the back. Yep. Sorry, I can't see you from here.
Hi everyone, I'm Tammy Ducharme, 27 June Street. My husband and I own 21 Sports Bar on West Main Street in Dudley. We both work in the Dudley Charlton Regional School District. My husband has been a technology education teacher for over 20 years at Shepherd Hill. I have been a part-time substitute teacher of K through 4 since the spring of 2021, after finding out the district was desperate for subs after COVID. If you are someone who thinks the schools do not need these funds to teach the future of our town, I challenge you to go and volunteer. Become a substitute teacher even. Schools are not what they were 20 years ago. There are many students who need additional support and services to learn at the same level as other students. My stepson graduated from Shepherd Hill in 2022 and just finished his freshman year at Nichols College. My youngest son is in the 3rd grade at Dudley L and plays both town Little League and soccer. I am asking the residents of Dudley not only to see the numbers and not only to see your individual households, but to look towards the future of our entire community. I would like to think our common goal is what is best for all residents, but in order to do so, we need to continue the funds of the important work of not only our schools, but both our municipal and safety offices as well. As the years pass, the financial outlook of the town is looking grim. We are one of the lowest tax rates in the state, which is great for our wallets. But what does it mean for the future of our community? We need to be sure that all the voters of Dudley understand the importance of these decisions and what the implications and what they can have on the town in years to come. As I have said at previous town meetings, we are at a very pivotal point in the town. We have very many opportunities that are in front of us to make our town better, but we need to take the steps now to ensure that the financial stability gets back on track. We cannot be afraid anymore of change or to take risks. Please, for all our residents, Give the budget a chance on the ballot in June in hopes that we can continue to take action to be better.
We've got it. Mr. Flynn, you were next on this, and then we'll come. Yeah.
Patrick Flynn, Lyons Road. 30 years ago, I graduated high school. 30 years ago, we had massive budget cuts. When I was in school, I sat on the school committee then. I was very involved as a young student in determining how we were going to balance budget during a time when it was most important to me as a student. Teachers worked to rule because of union contracts. Things like college recommendations were hard to come by. There were no services. Athletics were threatened to become much like the situation we're in now. And I honestly cannot believe that 30 years later, I sit here when most of the people in my generation went through that, because it wasn't just where I grew up. And we're contemplating damaging our students' lives. This is not 30 years ago. The world is a different place. And this is what's going to happen, by the way. If we do not vote this through, we are adults. We made promises to a bunch of people. First, we made promises to Charlton through a regional school district pact, and that has consequences. And let me tell you, Charlton has already voted this through, and they are ready to vote it through. And if this doesn't go through, they will vote it through, and this will be forced upon all of us. That means you will be funding the $2 million or whatever the number is, and you will be cutting things, as the chief said. And you'll be cutting things like the fire department said. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand the world we live in isn't the one that I grew up in, nor is the one that my parents grew up in. It's not even close. I've lived in town for 18 years now, 19 years. I have children in town, they do not go to schools. I pay a lot of taxes in town. I support this wholeheartedly. Hope all of you, if you're thinking, no one comes here on the fence. I'm not gonna pretend that we're gonna change minds in the 2 minutes that I'm up here. But I'm asking you, as an adult, as a person who has taken on the responsibility of home ownership, to pay taxes, that as someone in the community, you've made a promise and a commitment to your community. You've made a promise and a commitment for those who don't have the chance to vote. Those are your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, the kid who mows the lawn for you down the street, if they still do that anymore, who even knows? But we've all made promises for those kids. And by doing this tonight at this level, you're failing them. You're not even giving them a chance. And that is unbelievable that would even cross your mind, that you would do that to someone who can't do that for themselves. Everyone in here probably drove a car tonight, or probably did something. You probably went to driver's ed in high school. You probably had a favorite teacher. You probably had to take sports because it was the only thing that kept you to go to school every day because you're... Excuse me, sir. What it has to do is I'm a citizen. I can speak my mind. I gave you a chance to come up here, didn't I?
No, I'm not.
You think this is shooting the breeze? You're the problem. Thank you very much. I hope you vote yes for this. Vote yes. Don't let this guy win. Vote yes. Don't let this guy
win. Okay. We don't. Hey, excuse me. We don't banter back and forth. We don't banter back and forth. We don't address previous speakers or current speakers.
Unbelievable.
I determine if it's germane to the conversation. I am the governing authority at this meeting. You can be excused if you come at me again, sir. Very well. Thank you, sir. Mr. Breer. I think that's you.
John Breyer, 16 Flaxfield Road. There should be no doubt that the people of Dudley love this community. To even infer that there are people in this community that despise the school or hate the children, or hate police and fire, or this and that because it doesn't seem, that's ridiculous. The people in this community are good people. And through the years, they've always stepped up. They've stepped up for fire trucks, police cars. I remember fighting against full-day kindergarten, called it taxpayer subsidized daycare. Right? I was booed off the stage. It was only going to cost $250,000 a year if we did that. I don't think it costs $250,000 a year for full-day kindergarten anymore. The point is, just like in 2007 and 2008, the world changed. Financially, there was a meltdown. We are in the start of a storm here that most of you have never witnessed. You need to prepare. It's gonna get worse. On the ballot tonight, or on the warrant, you have a feasibility study for $468,000, whatever it is. That means you have intentions of putting up a $100 million school somewhere in the near future.
We'll address that debate.
Okay, but the point is, there's a storm upon us, and there are people on fixed incomes that can't make it here tonight because they can't drive. They still love the kids. To infer otherwise is just not right. It is time for a full operational and financial audit of all departments. And not saying looking for skeletons in the closet. I'm saying we have to get better. We need to be more efficient because next year at the same time, it's going to be 10 times worse. And there's going to be a heck of a lot more people unemployed. I'm going to vote for this because, first, we need a budget. You can't shut down the government. If the Article 3 doesn't pass and you just get shot down, you don't have a budget to operate the town or the school. I'm going to vote against the override come town election, and I think the people need to vote and be given the opportunity to vote. But this is just the start of the storm, and unfortunately, yes, people's lives are going to be impacted. If we can try to get ahead of it, early retirement, what other options are out there? How can we become leaner? How can we become more efficient? And how do we get the state to step up and pay the 100% reimbursements that they're supposed to instead of 70%? It's not going to happen with the one-party system there with state senate presidents and stuff like that. I think we're going to have to do a town-wide ballot initiative and get other towns so that we redo the Chapter 70 formulas, which is the root of the problem.
So, thanks, Mr. Brown. Senator here? Yes, Ms. Landry. And then the young lady up here who happens to be Molly's secretary. Okay. Yes, Ms. Landry. You can wait at the microphone.
Mark Landry, Board of Selectmen, Bud Drive. I'm here because I was elected. Therefore, I represent fellow veterans, police, fire, and all the departments, and all of you, whether you voted for me or not. I support this. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the fire department, the paramedics. 60 seconds away from being dead. And they prevented that from happening. So now I can still serve with a passion to back them up. Please keep us safe, we need them. We're gonna back them up. Veterans served and gave a lot. I'm backing them up. I'm gonna back all of you up to make sure when I go from department to department to see what they're doing, to do my job for you and see all the work they're doing, and they're educating me. So I know they're doing the job. That is where I come to tell you, I double check what they're doing. I talk with them, and I see what they're doing. I was elected, I represent you, I've got you back, and I'm for this. Thank you.
Hi, Molly Starczewski, 6000 Howard Drive. I graduated last year from Shepherd Hill. I took Spanish for 6 years, which for one helped me get my internship this year. Cut that, made you lose all of that access to graduation, college applications and internships and jobs in the future. I also participated in chorus. I was student council treasurer and then president, and I was also class secretary for 2 years. I understand people coming with monetary concerns, but at the same time, in voting no, you disenfranchise thousands of kids who are trying to get into colleges, who are playing sports and getting scholarships from those sports, who are going to school to be music educators, who are pursuing careers in the arts which thrive our culture and our community centers. And cutting school programs that hurts them, it hurts the teachers. You know what, you can vote no if you want, but you can tell my 12-year-old brother he can't play sports. And you can tell my sister that she no longer has a music program. Because hey, if you can vote no, then you can tell them that to their face. So, thank you.
Then we'll come Mr. Sullivan, then we'll go to Mr. Zakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Again, Stephen Sullivan, Cardinal Drive. I hear tonight people say cut fat out of the budget. I got a book that has fat in it. Speaking to the town side, we are down approximately 14 positions since the beginning of COVID. At one time, we consolidated 7 or 8 part-time departments, some which were benefited, into 2 full-time people who cover 3 departments each, and that's not giving them the service that they deserve because they fill in and they do a lot more than their 3 departments. One of the biggest complaints you hear is, I go to the town hall, nobody's there, the office is closed. We've cut so much that if one person's out, you lose coverage in a minimum of 3 departments. Our highway department, who's in charge not only of your snow removal, they do your patching, the tree removals. They're the guys out there fixing culverts. They put the sign up in front of the town hall. A little bit more than a general highway department. He's down a full-time laborer, a full-time truck driver. The gentleman that does building and grounds, he does the town hall, he does highway bond, he works at the fire department. Used to be 2.5 people in that department. It is now 1. I also hear people say, well, you didn't reduce your request. You guys did nothing on your budget. We reduced our initial request by over 200,000. And when I say 14 positions, that's on a total workforce of 80? About 80 if you count everybody. And again, we're not up here to compare stories. I'm not looking for sympathy. No one has been in that ambulance more than me. I had a heart attack, I had blood clots, and a little emotional, sorry. And they saved my life too. You want the old way where guys get up in the middle of the night, they donate their time, they come in for that $19 an hour the chief was talking about, and they're not paramedics. They can come in, they can take you to a hospital, hopefully you get there. You want paramedic service? Guys that can come in, administer medicine, can find out what's wrong with you. I'm gonna name him. Sergeant Bukowski, found me on the side of the road with a blood clot in my lung. He had the defibrillator ready to go. You want to go back in time, we can go back in time as far as you want. You can have guys run down the street, put a wooden ladder on the side of your house, and pump the water out of the brook. I wholeheartedly support the efforts of my board, this board, our department heads, our workers have put forward. It's been despite what you might read, it's been transparent, it's been thorough, and we get audited every year by a third-party auditing firm that we pay. And I'm telling you right now, there is no fat to be hidden, there is no money to be hidden, and if you don't believe it, get involved. There's plenty of seats. You can have mine. If you don't like the job I do, don't vote for me. Anybody here, you want to volunteer in the schools, go ahead. You want to come to a committee, we have empty seats everywhere in town. Don't tell me it's not transparent. Please don't cut the services. Please give us at least a chance to get to the ballot, then make your decision.
Scott Kowski, 8 Catherine Street. At this point, we're cheerleading. I move the question.
Motion's been made and seconded. As the purpose of moving the question is to move along, this is not a debatable point. Moving the question does require a 2/3 majority vote. Hold, please, for the technology. I could do this by voice, but we'll use the clickers. All right, we'll go ahead and move this to a vote. A1 is to move the question, meaning we end debate. 2 is no. Go ahead and open that up. Clearly, we have moved this question forward. We will go ahead and immediately move Article 3 to a vote. As presented. This is a 2/3 majority vote, as we do have stabilization money that's accounted for. At this time, we'll call Article 3 to a vote. 1 is to approve the motion. 2 is to deny the motion. We have a clear over 2/3 majority, 74%. Thank you. Article 4, authorize revolving funds to see if the town will vote to establish. Thank you for not doing that. If you are making your exit, please do so quietly, and we are going to maintain. Yes, sir.
I just urge folks not to leave because we've got plenty of business we still need to take care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Article 4, authorize revolving funds to see if the town will vote to establish fiscal year 2024 spending limits of the revolving funds set forth in Chapter 34, Section 34-5, authorize revolving funds for the town's general bylaws as follows, or take any other action relative thereto. Revolving funds will be listed with their annual spending limits: animal care, $15,000, arrest warrant services, $10,000, Board of Health Education Programs, $1,000, cemetery fees for the Board of Selectmen, $5,000, COA meals, $5,000, cruiser use and police details, $50,000, electric charging stations, $10,000, fire outside details, $25,000, fire penalties violations, $7,500, firearms permit services, $20,000, genealogy service, town clerk, $3,000, gift shop, $2,000, highway cleanup, $50,000, gifts to town, $50,000, hazardous material collection, $9,000, inspectors for fuel, gas, plumbing, and wire, $80,000, library, lost books, $5,000, municipal hearings for the Board of Selectmen, $2,000, planning documents, $1,000, regulatory compliance, $75,000, tax title fees, $75,000, monitor testing form or dump, $75,000, Veterans Bricks Memorial for $6,000, and website expenses, $3,000. Mr. Curry, it's been a while.
I move to approve Article 4 as recommended by the FAA and as printed in the warrant.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion on Article 4. Yes, Watson.
Robin Watson, Dresser Hill Road. I have 2 questions. COA meals. What is COA?
Mr. Ruda? Council on Aging is COA.
Okay, thank you. And also the electric charging stations, $10,000. Is that a state requirement? I don't know of anyone who drives a Tesla and needs to charge their
So under
car
a grant
at
we received, Mr. Moderator, a few charging stations that are now placed outside the library. It's a revolving account, meaning that the money received and collected when somebody comes and charges their car there offsets the cost of electric to the town and any maintenance or additional fees that may go along with those charging stations.
Thank you, Mr. Ruda. Any additional discussion for Article 4? Yes, at the back.
Jerry Frank, Causeway Road in Dudley. I just had a technical question. Does this money fall within the Prop 2.5 limits and stuff? Or is this like not part of that?
Yeah, revolving funds aren't set up for specific purposes, are set up for specific purposes, and the revenues received from these funds aren't considered a revenue source when we calculate budget or when we look at the town tax levy. Yes.
Hi, I'm Chris Marengo, 18 Sunnyside Road. I'm going to ask the question that we're all asking in the back. What is the gift shop?
Mr. Ruda can answer that question. I can tell you I just had a birthday and I have a fantastic Town of Dudley t-shirt, as well as a wonderful windbreaker, Town of Dudley. We've got some great opportunities to show some town and civic pride if you visit it. Mr. Ruda?
Oh, and where is that then?
Well, it's
a little short-staffed right now.
I was about to go there. All right, seeing no other hands or anybody standing, we'll move question 4 to a vote. All in favor, aye, 1. All opposed, 2. B, no. Motion passes clear majority. Article 5, fund recertification of real estate and personal property to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of $15,000.00 to fund the cost of the recertification of real estate and personal property values for FY 2028 as required by the Commonwealth Department of Revenue. Mr. Curry.
I move to pass over Article 5 as recommended by the FAA until the fall special town meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to pass over Article 5 as recommended by the FAA until the fall town meeting. Is there any discussion for Article 5? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of passing over, 1. All opposed to passing over, 2. "15 seconds can feel like a long time now, can't it?" Clear majority for the pass over. Article 6, fund cyclical inspections to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of $21,000.00 to fund the cost of the cyclical inspections of all properties in town that have not been inspected in the past 10 years for FY 2024 as required by the Commonwealth's Department of Revenue. Mr. Curry.
I move to pass over Article 6 as recommended by the FAA until the fall special town meeting.
Motion's been made and seconded to pass over to the town meeting, fall town meeting, sorry. Is there any discussion for Article 6? Seeing none, we'll move Article 6 to a vote. All in favor, 1. All opposed, no. 1A or 2B. Clear majority to pass over. Article 7, regulatory and compliance mitigation and response to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds the sum of $297,690.00 or some such amount to provide funding to redesign, test, install, and maintain water filtration systems for affected residents as required under the immediate response action issued to the town of Dudley by the Department of Environmental Protection pursuant to 310 CMR 40.0424 through 40.0427, and to meet such appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, is authorized to borrow such sum under and consistent with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7 or 8, or any other source of authority, and to issue any bonds or notes that may be necessary to that purpose, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Curry.
I move to approve Article 7 as recommended by the FAA and is printed in the warrant, and to borrow the sum of $297,690 for the purposes of this article.
Motion's been made and seconded on Article 7. Is there any discussion? Yes. I'll come to the back second. Yes, sir.
Again, and please never shut me down, please, okay? One more thing. I come from Tommy Wisconsin. Don't do this here. I just got one question. You borrowed 10 million last year, if I remember, on this room for water department. What's going on? You need another $500,000? I am playing guy. I just built houses. I built 100 houses in Dublin. I work hard in my life. Maybe my English not so perfect, but I got my heart I never go against schools because my daughter is teacher too. But when you told me sit down, because I am the boy, I just ask you, you want to borrow again $500,000?
Mr. Ruda or Mr. Zakowski, would you like to answer the question?
The article is for $297,690, not for $500,000. Is that the question, Mr. Moderator?
I believe so. Thank you. Yes, thank you for your patience.
Jerry from Causeway Road, could somebody just explain, is this going to come out of the general, tax money, or does this come out of the water fees?
Thank you, Mr. Ruda.
This money is to mitigate private wells on Eagle Drive. Both Gentex and the town of Dudley, because of the cap landfill, had groundwater testing performed, and it was put under immediate response action because it tested positive for high levels of PFAS. The levels of PFAS that have been mitigated in the town water supply represent the $10 million plus that have been borrowed from the SRF revolving fund of the state to put that big water treatment vessel down on Schofield Ave and elsewhere to treat the public water supply. This is a DEP order to treat private wells on Eagle Drive with filtration systems until a permanent solution can be figured out.
Thank you. I
almost forgot, the source of funding will be budgeted, it won't increase taxes. It'll be a regular budget item in the future. We have a few optional sources of funding. One of them is a cell tower agreement that was recently signed with the town. I'm trying to look it up here to give you a more precise answer, but we anticipate that the cell tower construction will begin in August of this year. And it's to lease a piece of town-owned land near the old sewer pump station on Schofield. It will give the town an annual revenue of between $20,000 and $35,000 over the course of 20 years with a initial payment on top of that of $100,000. So we would use outside the tax base, we would appropriate that money to pay the loan off. We've also signed a contract with Amoresco. Again, the town meeting approved this several years ago, to put a solar array on the cap landfill. And that generates a regular monthly income that will cover the cost of that loan. Again, we take that money, they pay for the lease on the land, and we would pay off the note with that. A few years ago, the town meeting approved 50% deposit of any land lease money, any money that the town generates in return for leasing pieces of its land. 50% of that automatically goes into capital improvement stabilization, right off the rip. So the thought at that time was we would use it towards capital purchases, vehicles, that sort of thing. But this is also a capital expense, so we can allocate that money at town meeting to pay off the note.
Thank you, Mr. Ruda.
Thank you.
Additional discussion on Article 7? Yes, sir.
John Swizzy, 30 Corbin Road. Just to clarify, so this water treatment incident is because the landfill is leaking? Something called PFAS? What does PFAS stand for exactly?
Thank you, Mr. Ruda.
When the town capped the landfill 15, 20 years ago, One of the requirements is to put monitoring wells in and around the landfill. One of the requirements was to test those for the first 3 or 4 years that it was capped. The town didn't do that. So here we are looking to put solar in. 2 years ago, we go to get our permitting for DEP, and they said, where are your tests? There are none. So we hired a company to test it, and they found high levels of PFAS in some of them, and dioxin 1,4. So the way that works is they test 500 feet out. The nearest house was 600 feet away from the landfill. We tested it. If it has a positive, any detection for PFAS, we can keep moving the requirement is to move the bubble out 500 feet more, so we work our way through neighborhoods at this point, and any of those private wells that have been impacted that meet that threshold, we're required to mitigate it. As we passed by Gentex, they required Gentex to test, and the same result came back in some of their vernal pools. So we're both under an immediate response action. These substances that keep popping up all over town and all over other towns and cities and so forth, I think at some point there's going to be a super fund to clean it up, because it's certainly not only Dudley. I'm sure a lot of these things have come right down the French River and up and around New England and everywhere else in the country. This was a response to a standard that was lowered by DEP. It lowered the standard for PFAS testing, and we found ourselves in this position. So the bottom line is that we're under an order, and it has to be mitigated until we can find a permanent solution.
I'm sorry, you still didn't explain what PFAS is.
Oh, so there's PFAS number 2 behind you. Mr. Zakowski does the law.
I could, or Mr. Zakowski.
Or maybe the water superintendent, if he's here.
We'll let Mr. Zakowski go ahead and give us the PFAS tutorial. Keep the chemistry to a minimum, though, please.
Oh, I'm not a chemist, I'm an electronics guy. PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl, blah, 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 blah. It's a word that's bigger than Webster Lake. It's something that's been around for about 60 or 70 years. It's in things like Teflon. It's in waterproofing and oil-resistant materials. It's in air conditioning. I don't know anything about that. But it's in hair conditioning and shampoos. It's in the conditioner you put in your clothing. It's in a lot of different regular things that we use. They found that it's cancer-causing. It's being pulled out of all of those things, but it's up in our water. It got into the water table. It's there. It doesn't break down very easily. It's got a very long half-life. And it needs to be mitigated. DEP, that's why you see the big white Brita tank down on Schofield Ave. We're building a water treatment plant on the water department. These chemicals everybody has them. They're everybody. It's just one of those things that we're all forced now to deal with. It's a healthcare issue. It's cancer causing, it needs to be mitigated. There are lawsuits, big lawsuits, big companies that are being sued over it. What that will yield, who knows? The only people who get rich on those things are lawyers. So that's the abridged version of it, but it's a chemical that we have to take care of.
Thanks, Mr. Zakowski.
I appreciate the clarification. So just looking towards the future, this sounds like something that's going to keep occurring, and expenses will keep being incurred in the future. Is there a plan in place to apply for any federal monies to deal with this, or are we just going to keep having to, on an ongoing basis, in $100,000 figures, keep having to deal with this?
Either Mr. Ruder or Mr. Zakowski, it's a pretty direct question. Sounds yes or no to me.
it's an ongoing process, Mr. Moderator, and we have been applying for federal monies right along. And we'll probably, when we get to the solution for this, when it's a multi-million-dollar solution, we'll apply for federal money as well. Whether it's a sweetheart loan where you get 20 or 30% forgiveness, like we're realizing with the SRF loan, or if it's a federal grant, it's a national, it's nationwide, so there will be money available, we're told, and we'll continue to go after it. The 297 that we're asking for tonight bridges the gap between the final solution and us being mandated to respond to the problem without delay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the answer.
Mr. Frank.
Jerry Frank, Causeway Road. I just wanted to point out that about 30 years ago, when we capped the landfill, the town meeting was asked if they wanted to fund a leachate collection system and pump the water up Indian Road and into the sewer system. And the town voted against it just to save money because they didn't want to have an override on that. And this is the cost we're paying by being short-sighted and not, voting against tax increases without looking at the long-term position.
Thank you. Any additional question for Article 7? Yes.
It's me again. But I built those houses there on Eagle Drive. And we tested, we sold the houses long time ago. And was everything perfect. What they was tested, approved. But you guys own it because when I put the roads there, it was designed for water line, town water. And you guys shut me down. No more extension on water lines. Now you're stuck with the problem. That's what I am telling you. But if you can vote yes, just vote yes.
Thank you. Additional discussion on Article 7. Seeing now, we'll move Article 7 to a vote. All in favor, 1. All opposed, 2. Motion passes clear majority. Article 8, unpaid bills of a prior year, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds the sum of $6,981.90 to pay unpaid bills of a prior fiscal year or take any other action relative thereto. Care, $1,574.30. Staples, $5,407.60. Mr. Curry.
I move to pass over Article 8 as recommended by the FAA until the fall special town meeting.
Motion's been made and seconded to pass over Article 8 till the fall special town meeting. Is there any discussion from Article 8? Yes, Mr. Zukowski.
Yeah, so we have unpaid bills and we're going to put off paying them. We can't come up with $6,900 to pay some bills for products and services that people in good faith provided to us. I don't know, there's just, it would reek at home, it kind of reeks here. So I would move to not pass it over, but we don't have any way to pay for this now? $6,000? $7,000?
So we're asking the question and that'll direct the vote, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody care to answer the question for Mr. Zukowski? Mr. Rudolph.
The recommendation of the FAA was to pass this over. If Mr. Zukowski has a source of funding, we're happy to take a look at that. Right now it's stabilization. There's no free cash.
Okay, the question's been asked and answered. Thank you. Any additional discussion for passing over Article 8? Seeing none, we'll move Article 8 to a vote to pass over. 1 for yay, 2 for nay. We have voted to pass over Article 8 to the fall town meeting. Article 9, high school feasibility study. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds the sum of $463,000.00 or some such amount for the cost associated with the town's allocable share for the costs of a feasibility study as required under the Massachusetts School Building Authority School Building Grant Program and as recommended by the Dudley Charlton Regional School Committee, and to meet said appropriation. Such amount shall be raised in the tax levy, subject to the favorable vote by the town of a Proposition 2.5 capital outlay exclusion ballot question in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 21C, I, 1, and 2, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Curry.
I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $463,000 for the costs associated with the town's allocable share of the cost of a feasibility study as required under the Massachusetts School Building Authority Grant Program and as recommended by the Dudley Charlton Regional School Committee. Such amount to be raised in the tax levy, subject to a favorable vote by the town of a Proposition 2.5 capital outlay exclusion ballot question in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 59, subsection 21C, I, 1/2.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion for Article 9. Yes, right next to the mic.
It's Colin Humphreys of 10 Lakeside Drive. So I'll be quick, but I want to passage of Article, the passage of Article 9, the high study. Researchers from the University of in the United Kingdom found overwhelmingly that students perform better when they are in a comfortable learning environment. Specifically, they found, and I quote, lighting, temperature, air quality, ownership, flexibility, complexity, and color all have a significant impact on a student's ability to learn. While I certainly have many fond memories of this building, as a recent graduate, I can testify there is definitely room for some improvement. The entirety of our school is currently air conditioned, or I think a few offices, as you're probably aware. That can make the school very uncomfortable for students several months out of the year. I can recall many days when the school was hot and humid in September, even October, May, June. And that was a great distraction to me and my classmates. Additionally, I do recall several times where the roof of the gymnasium was leaking, and the lighting throughout the schools is also not the greatest. I think it's the same, if I'm not mistaken, in a lot of places it's the same since this building has been built. You know, I love Shepherd Hill, and I think our custodians do a great job upkeeping this school. However, I think it would not hurt to explore how we can do better. Our neighbors in Charlton already voted to undergo this study last week, and with all that being said, I encourage voters here tonight to do the same by passing Article 9. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, at the back corner. Yep. Oh, is that Mr. Frank?
Just real quick, could somebody tell us how much this study is going to cost, total, including Charlton, or the state's portion is going to pay, just so that we have an idea on that?
Total cost of the feasibility study?
Yeah.
Sure. Superintendent LaMarche.
Through the moderator, the total value of the feasibility studies is $1 million. That is a very conservative number in today's dollars with feasibilities when you're invited into the Mass School Building Authority. The Shepherd Hill School Building Committee, which has representatives from this community and from Charlton, voted on that number. It is a very costly number, but there is a reimbursement part of this feasibility study, so that will come back to this community as a credit. That will be anywhere between 50 and 59% of the value of $463,000. So the remaining balance of $1 million is what the town of Charlton has put forward. Keep in mind, this is a ballot question that will come out on, this is part of the ballot question on June 12th as well, for one-year capital exclusion. And again, any reimbursement from the Mass School Building Authority, the grant program, will come back to the town of Dudley as a credit on future assessments.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Right at the mic, please.
I just wanted to ask on that, is that money is not like money that's actually going physically towards something to repair the school, is it? Is it just like a study that they're gonna look into things, or?
The question really about the feasibility study, yes, it would be an architectural overview of the facility, you know, top to bottom, front to back, you know, look and make recommendations for a future renovation or a build.
So that's actually just to inspect and to come up with a plan as to what we need to do.
Yeah, I'll let Superintendent LaMarche expand on that, yeah. Very good question.
Thank you for the question through the moderator. Yes, it is a complete study all the way to schematic design as to what this community believes it would be best for Shepherd Hill moving forward. That could be anything from renovation to new construction. It's a requirement to be part of the grant program with MSBA. Otherwise, you'd have to take on the complete feasibility study as a community in itself. So to be in their grant program, keep in mind that the district has applied for 14 years to be part of the grant program. We were lucky enough to be pulled into one of the phases, which is eligibility, which we're in right now. In order to get to the next phase, feasibility, we need to secure local authorization for funding for feasibility. And I just want to let everyone know while I have the microphone that I had to apply for a 30-day extension to get into feasibility. If we do not get this approved now on June 12th, we will be kicked out and we'll be asked to start all over again with the statement of interests to try to apply to get into a grant program again for Shepherd Hill Regional High School.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lastly, if you want to look at an example of a feasibility study, you can go on our website. Look on our website under where it says Shepherd Hill Regional High School and MSBA. Hit that tab and there's an example of a feasibility study. It's a very large, several documents. It's several of them are around 800 pages. It's just an example of how it brings the analysis of the system and recommendations moving forward, which again, the community is heavily involved in that recommendation moving forward.
Thanks. Mr. Frank, you're up again. Notice you keep moving down in the aisle.
These are all real short questions, though. So I have two questions here. One, is this feasibility study just for Shepherd Hill, or is it for all the entire school district? And my second question is when the state reimburses us a good chunk of that money, does that go to pay down like any bond or something we hold out to pay for this, or does it go into the general fund?
Superintendent LaMarche.
Through the moderator, the reimbursement again comes back on a credit from the district to the town. How the town deals with that credit on their assessment is up to the town. It's not up to the school district, so the assessment gets lowered by that credit. And then this feasibility is specific for Shepherd Hill Regional High School. Keep in mind the approval of the capital plan last September, including it gave us the ability to look at our other buildings to see what their needs are. Not at this level, not a $1 million level, because it's not part of a grant program where there would be reimbursement, but at some level for us to take a look at those facilities and what their needs may be, because they have not had substantial renovations for over 20 years as well.
Thank you. Yes, next to the mic.
My name's Ellen LaPrise, 23 Patridge Hill Road. Is this the first, we've applied for this grant 13 years? Is it usually this much money?
Superintendent LaMarche.
Through the moderator, yes, applying over this is the first time we've been invited into their program, and it's not, getting invited to their program isn't necessarily because we're not appreciated what have you, they have their own budget, and every district in the Commonwealth is applying for, not all the time, but all the towns are applying for participation in this particular program. So they look at our facility, look at the value of the facility moving forward, the square footage, and everything, and they put it into a formula and see if we can be invited into the program for future consideration for their budget, never mind anything that we'd want to do. So this is the first time in 14 years we were invited into their program. Like anything, the value of this continues to go forward. I was involved in a building project. And keep in mind, every step of this process, this is just feasibility phase. Any phase you go to next, we have to come back to you as the voters to determine if you want to support us moving forward with that. This is not a done deal from that point. But the value of everything continues to increase. When I was part of a program that was approved in 2014, the feasibility study was roughly $765,000.
So we've been voting on this every year, the last 13 years?
Through the moderator, no. You have not voted on this because it hasn't come forward to you because we're not invited into the Mass School Building Authority to bring this to you as a vote. The school committee's been voting on it every year to submit something to the state, but we haven't been invited in until right now. So it's never come forward to the town meeting to vote on.
So we have not had to pay anything into it up until now?
Correct. Through the moderator, that is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, it's essentially an application process. If they accept you, they invite you to pay into it. We haven't been invited to pay. Yes, off the center aisle.
Robin Watson, Dresser Hill Road. The wording of Article 9, ballot question number 2, is very misleading, and it violates the Massachusetts General Law 59, Section 21, because it says, as required under the Massachusetts School Building Authority School Committee, is intended to confuse the voters. This is not a requirement for us to apply or participate in this feasibility study. It's a desire of the school committee. Also, I find that the wording violates the Massachusetts Division of Local Services Prop 2.5 ballot override question requirements and procedures, because for that document, Proposition 2.5 ballot questions cannot be used to provide voters with information on the impact of an unsuccessful vote or underlying events or circumstances that may cause budget difficulties, nor may it be used to promote or advocate for the override. Therefore, I move to amend Article 9 by striking the following text. As required under the Massachusetts School Building Authority School Building Grant Program, and as recommended by the Dudley Charlton Regional School Committee on Article 9 and ballot question 2. The new wording that I propose would be to see if the town will vote to assess an additional $463,000 in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of funding the town's share of the cost of a high school feasibility study by the Dudley Charlton Regional School District as a capital expenditure fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023.
Thank you. Motion's been made. I hear a second. Thank you. Any additional discussion on the petition for the amendment? Mr. Moderator?
I would ask that town council come up and inform everyone here as to the process that we went through to craft that question.
Thank you. And as a point of information, there was some legal question that was posed in the original language. If you could go ahead and address that as well, Mr. Blake, if you could.
Happy to. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, Mr. Moderator. Hello, everybody. As you know, I'm Jeff Blake from KP Law. With respect to the wording of the article, the wording of the ballot question, not only did my office, who represents about 135 municipalities in the Commonwealth, we've been doing it for about 40 years, and have drafted probably hundreds, maybe even thousands of these articles. Not only did my office review it and approve it as to legal form, but so did what is known as your bond counsel. Anytime a municipality wants to borrow and bond for that borrowing, The bonding companies have their own counsel, and that counsel will review the process, review the language of the warrant articles, review the notices given, review the ballot questions. Bond counsel also reviewed this language and has signed off on this language. With respect to your amendment, I'm a little confused as to exactly what that was attempting to do. It sounds like you're trying to strike language, but then when you gave us the ultimate recitation of your amendment, you did not put in there any contingency language. Was it your intent to remove the contingency language?
Ms. Watson?
It was my intent to strike the text that says, as required under the Massachusetts School Building Authority School Building Grant Program, and as recommended by the Dudley Charlton Regional School Committee. Because first of all, we are not required to participate in this feasibility study. And furthermore, more importantly even, a Prop 2.5 override question cannot promote or advocate for the override or exclusion. And I find that when you say, as recommended by the school committee, you are doing just that. You're trying to convince voters who might not be that well informed that this is a required feasibility study. It is not. And you're trying to advocate for that. Just simply ask the question. You agreed to fund additional $463,000 for a feasibility study, and I'd like to see the word capital expenditure on there because it's worded exactly the same as the Prop 2.5 override. So how do we know that this is a one-year ask? There's nothing in the legal wording that says that.
Mr. Carmignani?
Good evening. A bit of clarification. I'd like to thank Attorney Blake for coming up. Yes, Lock Lord LLP had reviewed that they are a bond counsel. They are that independent third party that reviews what's being done. Also hasten to add that anything that's been approved at town meeting isn't signed into law. There is review with the Secretary of State. So if something is put forward, reviewed by town council, reviewed by bond council, it's being put forth, that it would entertain additional scrutiny and be passed. Nobody typed this up quickly. I think when there's reference to the feasibility study and it's being required, it means we need to make a project shovel-ready. How do we do that? We need some architects to go through and to perform this plan. The dollar amount and the share have been discussed, I believe, as recommended by the Dudley Charlton Regional School District. I think that is the mechanism that says the school committee had gone forth and recommended that this be funded in such a manner, as opposed to including it in the regular assessment.
And could you speak to the one-year commitment of funds to pay this $463,000?
I think the statute reference specifically speaks to that. The statute references 1 year. You aren't issuing debt, you are creating a line item with that dollar amount. The dollars are dispersed as needed through the warrant process. There is no wait time for any bank to do it. It's just raised in the tax rate. We warrant out what needs to be paid as it is paid. And at the end of that fiscal year, that's the sunset provision. So it's on the town to spend all 463 for its intended purpose. And the following year, it's as though it had never existed.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I motion that we move forward and vote on the amendment.
Motion's been made to move on the vote for the amendment. We are looking for a majority vote. A 1 is for yes in support of the amendment. A 2 is a no, declining the amendment. Oh, please. I'm sorry, the question's been moved. We are going to a vote. We'll go ahead and move this question to the vote. This is a vote for the amendment to be made. A 1 is yes, a 2 is no. Vote for the amendment has failed. We move back to the original discussion for Article 9's motion. Any additional discussion for Article 9? Yes.
This is, I think we need money for school children. We don't need money for those local bureaucrats. You know that. They're gonna come in here, what they're gonna do? Take $500,000 and we're crying for school kids who have no money? What you guys doing? That's my opinion. And you know that we vote for Trump, Dudley vote for Trump, and we are on blacklist in state and federal government. That's mean, watch out, because you're never gonna get any credit. No, that's what happened.
No, your point up until that point was fine. Any additional discussion for Article 9? Seeing none, we'll move Article 9 to a vote. 1 is in favor of supporting the article as the FAA motion. 2 is in opposition. 1 in favor, 2 opposed. Article has, please. Yes, required a majority vote. Thank you. It's passed. Article 10, Agricultural Commission to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds the sum of $1,500.00 to be added to their account for fundraising activities and events or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Curry.
I move to pass over Article 10 as recommended by the FAA until the fall special town meeting.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion on Article 10. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move Article 10 to a vote to pass over Article 10. 1 for yay, 2 for nay. I have to say the audience has been doing a tremendous job making sure the clickers work. I haven't heard any complaints or cries that your clicker is not working. Thank you for pointing it directly at that antenna. This is going to move swimmingly from this point on. Thanks for sticking around. All right, this has passed with a majority vote. Article 11, accept, yes?
I got a question first, and then I'll make regarding, I want to go back to Article 3, because before we lose a quorum here, I want to make sure that we can finalize Article 3 so that it can't be opened up at a further meeting. So I think there's a procedure where I can do that, where I can say that I want to revisit a certain vote, and it can only be done once. So we can vote again on that again, and not, so it can't be rehashed out tomorrow. I just want to make that vote definite tonight.
There will be a motion to reconsider, and there is a timeline that we would follow to adhere to that, yes.
Is that what you're telling me to do? To make a motion to reconsider?
Well, I'm not suggesting you do anything. It's called a motion to reconsider.
If we reconsider, then that would keep the vote so it can't be reconsidered tomorrow or at the next. Is that correct?
It's actually a good question. I'm going to refer to Mr. Blake. It can be only done once. That's correct.
Okay, I'm going to withdraw that until, to see if we can finish tonight or not.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Where were we? Article 11? Article 11. I think we're Article 11. Article 11, accept a portion of Partridge Hill Road to see if the town will vote to accept the layout of a portion of Partridge Hill Road as a public town way as heretofore laid out by the Board of Selectmen and shown on a layout plan entitled Partridge Hill Road, Dudley, Massachusetts, dated January 15th, 2023, prepared by B&R Survey Incorporated as marked Attachment A and provided as a supplement to this warrant and placed on file with the town clerk as required by law, and further to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by gift, purchase, or eminent domain the fee to and/or easements in said roadway land for all purposes for which public ways are used in the town of Dudley, and such access utility and/or other easements incidental or related thereto, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
I move to approve Article 11 as recommended by the town planner and highway superintendent and as printed in the warrant.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion for Article 11? Seeing none, we'll move Article 11 to a vote. This does require a 2/3 majority. All in favor of Article 11 as motioned? 1. Opposed? 2. Article 11 has passed. Article 12, St. Anthony Road Betterment. To see if the town will vote to authorize the treasurer, with approval from the Board of Selectmen, to borrow $73,224.00 or some such sum to be expended under the control of the Highway Department for improvements to the private way access to St. Anthony Road, including incidental and related costs for said improvements, and to meet said appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Selectmen, is authorized to borrow such sum under and consistent with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 7, or any other source of authority, and to issue bonds and notes to the town therefore. And further, the Board of Selectmen, acting pursuant to the authority granted under General Law, Chapter 80, and the town's road betterment bylaw, shall assess betterments on all property benefiting for the purpose of recovering the cost thereof, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
I move to approve Article 12 as printed in the warrant.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Article 12, is there any discussion? Yes, sir.
Steve Scott, St. Anthony Road, representing all the landowners on St. Anthony Road. As you know, the betterment program is established to move private ways into the public domain. The cost of that is incurred by the owners on the particular properties of the road, so that the town only borrows that, and then we are assessed all that money to recoup back to the town. So the town's really not liable for any money. We wind up paying everything back based on the taxes. So just wanted to let people know that.
Thank you. Additional discussion for Article 12? Seeing none, we'll move Article 12 to a vote. This does require a 2/3 majority. All in favor, 1. All opposed, 2. Motion passes. Article 13, grant Board of Selectmen authority to provide residents with option of reduced costs for energy. To see if the town will vote to grant the Board of Selectmen, pursuant to General Law, Chapter 164, Section 134, the authority to research, develop, and participate in a contract or contracts to aggregate the electricity load of the residents and businesses in town, and for other related services independently or in joint action with other municipalities, retaining the right of individual residents and businesses to opt out of the aggregation or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
I move to approve Article 13 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is the point of order about the slide? Yeah, that definitely is not what we're talking about. Hang tight, we'll go ahead and reverse that so we can see it. The article is printed in your warrant. Like I said, sometimes the technology might fail us. There we are, almost back. How's that? All right. Okay, we had a motion, and we had a second. Is there any discussion on Article 13? Yes, sir.
John Swayze, 30 Crogan Road. I have a couple questions on this. I'm going to ask two questions. They're really two sides of the same coin, so I would imagine a single answer would do. What's being proposed to the power being, that we're being asked to grant the select board, is any scheme that is devised by the select board purely a financial arrangement? From what I'm reading, this appears to be some sort of a group purchasing power, where we might enter into a covenant with other municipalities in the area. And so I'm just wondering if this is purely a financial on paper arrangement, or is there any possibility of some sort of physical plant being built, industrial solar arrays, wind turbines, as part of this power being granted to the select board?
Thank you, Mr. Ruda.
Mr. Moderator, I'm happy just to answer the question plainly. There's no option to have a power plant in town, but it's on paper. It's aggregate buying of different sources of energy. So when approved, if it's approved tonight, the certified vote is forwarded to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts DPU, which is the Department of Utilities, for review and approval. The town is told that review and approval through DPU takes about 11 months at this point. We're going to work with our legislative delegation to try to push that through a little more quickly. Upon approval from DPU and notification to the town, we will proceed with the next step, which includes at least one or more public meetings to inform residents about the program and options that are available. After the public meetings, I'll work with the energy aggregator to determine which types of energy, wind, solar, nuclear, fossil, etc., and in what proportions the town will make available to residents to offset the cost of energy. So that's part of the public meeting, is that the town comes together, they come to the public meeting, and they make it known. They want to use more fossil fuels for lesser cost, or they want to rely more on solar, and all different types of energy, and that's how we make the informed decision to negotiate with the aggregator. It's not something that I come up with, or the board comes up with. It's based on a public hearing to see what the emphasis is. And finally, each resident, when we get to the point where the decisions are made, and they're based almost entirely probably on costs. I'm just guessing based on tonight and the way the vote's gone, but I'm assuming that it'll be mostly based on cost rather than other issues. But we'll find out if this passes tonight. It goes to a town meeting. So then every resident with an electric bill will receive a ground mail form that will require the residents to opt in to the aggregate purchasing and following a deadline. There'll be a response from each person. So you opt in, and you can opt out at any time. It's not something that we just thrust upon the town. Every person with an electric bill makes the decision on their own. Opt in, opt out. There's no penalty if you opt out.
So to clarify, any arrangement that's being proposed by the select board would A, have to pass town meeting, and B, even if it passed town.
It doesn't have to pass town meeting. It has to go through a public forum, which is required. It's not a vote. It's input, and the aggregator is actually there as well as town officials to hear the town's input as to what they want the emphasis on the generation of power to be.
Okay. But the opt-out is a possible.
The opt-out is, if you had it for 2 weeks and you hated it, you just can opt out of it. There's no penalty.
Thank you for that clarification. There is something I wanted to bring up. And again, this is the first time that, unfortunately, I haven't had to look at the warrant before tonight. But the Master Law 164, subsection 134, that's actually referenced in the warrant item. There's a concerning passage in that particular subsection that I'd like to just, it's a very brief part, I'll just read it here. A municipality or group of municipalities establishing a load aggregation program pursuant to subsection A made by a vote of its town meeting or legislative body, whichever is applicable, adopt an energy plan which shall define the mayor of the municipality or municipalities, this is the concerning part, may implement demand-side management programs and renewable energy programs that are consistent with any state energy conservation goals developed pursuant to Chapter 25A or Chapter 164. So the way I read that, I hear demand-side management programs, and that sounds to me as if there's a possibility of putting forward a program that would actually somehow impose limits on individual energy consumers. And my fear is I, for one, don't want a smart meter in my house. I don't want to be powered down against my will. I don't want to have my energy usage limited by a greater authority. That's something that's just concerning to me in this. I won't be very honest. I haven't looked into this as much as I'd like to, but just on first blush, this does not look like something that I would want to see happen. This might be a great thing. I would perhaps urge a no vote on this pending further review. And maybe so we can look toward the future, because believe me, I don't want more expensive energy bills. If we can lower our bills, I love it, but the devil's in the details, and this is concerning to me that that's in national law, and that's what's being referenced in this warrant item. Thank you.
Brett?
Hi, John Breyer, Foxfield Road. On the demand side, they're talking about consumer demand. There's a supply side, all right, which would be the energy companies actually producing it, looking for a market. Demand side is all of the consumers here that have a demand for it, joining together and actually working out a cooperative or some sort of agreement to get it. It has nothing to do with demanding that you do this in the future. It's a term used in the industry. And I just want to commend you because I think it's exactly what the town and government needs to be doing. I mean, right? People got whacked with energy costs and the electric costs this winter. Some people, 39, right, went up 4 times as much. Really, really good. And after you take care of the electric, take care of Charter and Spectrum, okay?
All right, allow that chuckle. I'm not a fan of Charter.
Brianna Jamian, 80 Mason Road. I just want to say that I fully support this. A lot of us have National Grid. Over the winter, our rates were up to 33 cents per kilowatt hour. I know my family is pretty modest means, and we got almost $1,000 electric bill right before Christmas, and that has continued. So I really appreciate the town looking into the municipal aggregation program that most other towns in this area and in the Commonwealth are participating in.
Thank you. We'll stick with the right side, and then we'll get back up there. Yes, my right side.
Foreman Road. This is an awesome plan. I believe Oxford is currently taking advantage of this plan. However, I think it is something that the people in this audience could benefit from. You can actually go online individually and get a lower cost for your energy. We signed up recently for something called Constellation. It's for 3 years. We can opt out at any time, and we're paying
14.3 cents, I believe, per kilowatt hour, as opposed to National Grid's 33. And the only difference is you have Constellation for your source, and then the delivery is done by National Grid. So you will still pay National Grid an amount of money, but you're not going to pay them 33 cents a kilowatt hour.
Great public information. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Frank.
Jerry Frank, Causeway Road, again. I just want to say that every town that I've read about that's joined this program has very strongly lowered their rates, and also has the choice of what kind of electricity they want to use. So it's a two-point thing. And the main point I want to make is that I think it wasn't quite clear, even though it's been said, that anybody has at any point can opt out of this and just continue as they are and not be affected by it.
Thank you. Is there any additional question for Article 13? Seeing none, we'll move Article 13 to a vote. 1 is in favor of the article as printed, 2 is opposed. We are looking for majority. Motion is passed. For Article 14, I'm looking for unanimous consent to allow the ignoring of the 7.5 pages of text and just read the introduction to the article and have discussion on that. Is there anyone opposed? Thank you. Article 14, update floodplain bylaw and maps to see if the town will vote to amend the Dudley zoning bylaw by deleting section 3.02 floodplain district in its entirety and inserting a new section 3.02 floodplain district or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
The Board of Selectmen defers this article to the Planning Board for recommendation to town meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Guy Horn, 3 Linda Vista Lane, Planning Board. Article 14, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has prepared a new floodplain map for the town of Dudley. In order to maintain in the National Flood Insurance Program, the town must adopt changes to its floodplain bylaw. The proposed bylaw has been approved by the state as meeting...
Yeah, Mr. Horn, pardon me, if you could make a motion, then we can go into this discussion once and second.
At its April 26, 2023 Planning Board meeting, the board held the required public hearing on the proposed amendment. Upon closing of the public hearing, the board voted 4-0, recommending approval of the amendment to the town meeting. And I so move.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Horn, you've got the floor if you'd like to talk a little bit about it.
Okay, so it's basically what I just was starting to say was the Federal Emergency Management, FEMA, has prepared a new floodplain. The requirements of this are intended to prevent loss of life and property and reduce taxpayers' costs for disaster relief, as well as minimizing the economic and social hardships that result from flooding. If the article is not approved, Dudley landowners will not be able to obtain subsidized flood insurance, and they would not be eligible for most forms of disaster assistance.
Thank you. Is there any additional discussion on Article 14? Seeing none, we'll move Article 14 to a vote. We do require a 2/3 majority. All in favor as presented by the Planning Board, 1. All opposed, 2. Motion passes. All right. There we go. If you notice, we do have an editing of the slides going on as I'm starting up the articles. It is because they're sequenced incorrectly. So we're just updating that article number. Article 15, Site Plan Review Zoning Amendment. To see if the town will vote to amend the Dudley zoning bylaw, section 5.04.02A, projects requiring minor site plan review, subsection 3, by deleting the word additional and adding a new phrase after the word maintenance as follows. The construction or renovation of parking facilities involving 5 but fewer than 10 strike additional parking spaces with the exception of normal maintenance, adding, such as patching pavement, striping lines, repairing and cleaning drainage systems, pruning/replacing vegetation, traffic control measures, and other general upkeep of the lot, and to see if the town will vote to amend the Dudley zoning bylaw, section 5.04.02B, projects requiring major site plan review, subsection 3, by deleting the word additional and adding a new phrase after the word maintenance as follows. 3, the construction or renovation of parking facilities involving 10 or more strike additional parking spaces with the exception of normal maintenance, insert, such as patching pavement, striping lines, repair/cleaning drainage systems, pruning/replacing vegetation, traffic control measures, and other general upkeep of the lot, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
The Board of Selectmen defers this article to the Planning Board for a recommendation to town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Horn.
At its April 26, 2023 Planning Board meeting, the board held the required public hearing on the proposed amendment. Upon closing the hearing, the board voted 4-0, recommending the approval of this amendment to the town meeting, and I so move.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there discussion on Article 15? Yes.
John Breyer, Foxfield Road. When we originally put this in the zoning bylaw, it was for additional parking. By striking that word additional, you've changed the entire intent of this site plan review, and you're subject to any driveway or parking lot where 5 or more vehicles, or 10, right, is now, if they want to rip up the asphalt and repave it, they need a site plan review to do that. According to this, by striking additional, that's exactly what you've been made with by doing this.
Mr. Horn?
I'm sorry. The other point is, when we added the additional parking space, it was for, say, let's just say, you had a business and they wanted, and there's 20 spots already, and they wanted to add an additional 5 spots. That's where the site plan review would come in to make sure, okay, everything's good. But the way by striking additional, you've changed the entire intent of that plan.
So this change is proposed to help situations such as Park & Shop Plaza that just was redone, where large areas of asphalt were removed and repaved, and other things could have been done such as islands or flow of traffic. Things could have been done better than what they were. That project went through without even coming to the planning board. And that reason was because it said that additional was in the bylaws. So they said, we don't have to do it.
Mr. Breyer?
And that's exactly what should have happened. Parking shop, private property owner, a private business with a parking lot's been there for years deteriorating, decided to repave and do something. And it happened quick. And it, sure, it may not be how you desired it, but it was done efficiently and according to their budgets. That's the way it should work.
Thank you. You respond, like.
It's just that it had no oversight from the town or the consultant town engineer, and it should have.
Thank you. Is there any additional discussion for Article 15? Seeing none, we'll move Article. Did I see a hand? No. He was just waiting. Yes.
I'd like to amend it maybe to say, keep the word additional and add the word maintenance, I guess. So it's additional or maintenance under the parking lot, so it includes both, both situations. Do I have to come up with the exact words?
Yes, we would need an exactly worded motion, yes.
Well, I'd like to strike out the word, I'd like to, instead of not strike out the word additional, and add the words "in maintenance of parking spaces," including the new, and keep the new wording in. The new sentence. Such as patching pavements, stripping lines, repairing, cleaning, drainage, etc.
So your motion is, I won't read the entire thing, but I'll read up to the word additional parking spaces. The construction of renovation of parking facilities involving 5 but fewer than 10 additional, and what else?
Or maintained.
Or maintained parking spaces, etc. In paragraph 3 of that section, and then the same language in the next section. Motion was made, not seconded. All right, motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Sullivan. This is a discussion on the amendment only.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Stephen Sullivan, Cardinal Drive. I served with the mover of the original motion, and I served with the gentleman who spoke about the private property. I'm asking the members to defeat the amendment. One of the biggest things we hear, and I'm sure the police chief and the fire chief and highway superintendent can back it up, is people worry about traffic exiting and entering parking lots into the public way. And I believe the intent of the planning board by adapting this bylaw, as the chairman started to state, is you could put traffic calming measures in place, such as islands and other things which would help with the traffic flow. And I understand it's a private property issue and someone owns the property, but the public safety should outweigh the private use coming onto the public way. So I'm asking for it to be defeated. I think the planning board has made a good faith and a very good call to amend this bylaw.
Thank you. Additional discussion on amending the article as proposed. Seeing none, we'll move the vote to amend the article, reflecting the change outlined previously. This time, 1 is in favor of the amendment, 2 is opposed to the amendment. Motion to amend has failed. Back to Article 15 as proposed. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none for Article 15 discussion, we'll go ahead and move that to a vote on recommendation from the Planning Board. All in favor, 1. All opposed, 2. Motion has failed, requiring 2/3 majority. Article 16, shared driveway standards. Looking for unanimous consent for Article 16 to dispense with the reading of all the verbiage. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Article 16, shared driveway standards, to establish design standards for shared driveways, to see if the town will vote to amend the Dudley zoning bylaw, section 7.01.00, driveway/curb cut permit, subsection 4F, by inserting the following underlined language as design standards for construction of shared driveways, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
The Board of Selectmen defers this article to the Planning Board for a recommendation to town meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Horn.
At its April 26, 2023 Planning Board meeting, the board held the required public hearing on the proposed amendment. Upon closing the hearing, the board voted 4-0, recommending approval of the amendment to town meeting, and I so move.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion for Article 16.
So this article is basically putting some specifications on the common driveway that is currently allowed by right in the town of Dudley. A common driveway is a driveway that's shared between 2 properties or 2 households. What this proposed amendment does is put specifications such as length, width, thickness of pavement, and just add specificity to the current bylaw.
Thank you. Yes?
Again, John Breyer, Flaxfield Road. Currently allowed by right. Why would you surrender a right? This is private property. It's a private driveway. The design standards you have here is almost for like a town road. Plus, I mean, it's almost as if someone copied something from some homeowners association. It says, oh, you need 16 feet of this, 20 feet of that, or you need vegetation here. It's a private driveway between two people. The government has no, keeping it the way we originally worded it is vague enough so that people can enjoy their private property rights. The town has no place. The only thing I could see possibly is the skirt, requiring a skirt of 20 to 25 feet into the public road, that be reviewed. But that's it. So I would ask you to defeat this, pass it over and refine it so that it keeps the government out of people's business.
Thanks. Mr. Horn, just for clarification though, the planning board meetings are public and anyone in the community can participate and engage in these discussions, correct? And it's a full recommendation of the planning board in this case. All right, thank you. Any other discussion on Article 16? Yes, sir. And then we'll get back to Mr. Frank.
Hi, my name is Don Wilson from 21 Mill Street. I have a question to Mr. Horn. What would this do for people that have existing driveways where they don't have enough property to actually match these new recommendations?
Thank you. Mr. Horn.
The existing driveways would be grandfathered. It's only going forward.
But what happens when they need to be repaired?
It would still be grandfathered. It was in existence prior to the zoning amendment.
There's nothing that's stated in this article.
Could ask me. Yeah, our town planner's saying it would still be grandfathered.
I hope that we can take your word for it, because if it's not, it's going to cause a huge problem with all these people with shared driveways.
Thank you. Town planner, just the head nod and the acknowledgement is that it is a grandfathered situation. Yes, thank you. Any additional discussion, Article 16? All right, I'm going to withdraw that point then. We'll go ahead and move Article 16 to a vote at this point. All in favor of the planning board recommendation? Aye, 1, nay, 2. This does require a 2/3 majority vote. The motion has failed. Article 17, through unanimous consent, I am looking for permission to forego the pages of text. Again, I thank you. Article 17, Battery Energy Storage System, otherwise known as BESS, to see if the town will vote to amend the Dudley zoning bylaw by adding a new section, 3.16, Battery Energy Storage System, to amend section 2.03.02, Use by District Chart, by adding a new line for battery energy storage system, and to amend section 3.07 Town Refuse Disposal District to specify where such uses will be allowed or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
The Board of Selectmen defers this article to the Planning Board for a recommendation to town meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Horn.
At its April 26, 2023 Planning Board meeting, the board held the required public hearing on the proposed amendment. Upon closing the hearing, the board voted 4-0 to recommend approval of this amendment to town meeting, and I so move.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there discussion on Article 17? Mr. Horn.
The proposed amendment will allow battery storage systems greater than 250 kilowatts by right with site plan approval of the planning board in all industrial and light industrial districts and the town refuse disposal district. This bylaw provides important safeguards such as large setbacks from adjoining properties, screening and noise limits, and it requires conformance to industry standards and building and fire codes. The use is appropriate in the industrial districts. These use can provide as much needed source of revenue for the town. They can provide new options for landowners in industrial areas that don't have access to public water and sewer. They typically do not require large areas of land to be financially viable, and the bylaw requires the system to be removed at the end of their useful life by requiring a financial surety to cover the cost of the removal.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Additional discussion or questions related to Article 17? Mr. Bryan.
Sorry. 250 kilowatts. You realize the average Tesla is 40 kilowatts. Some Teslas are 100 kilowatts. So you could have 2.5 Teslas series together, and they're not covered under this bylaw. I think the idea of having the bylaw is a good one, but wherever you got this from is obsolete and ancient. 250 kilowatts is nothing. I think it's also based on an older battery technology, lithium ion, and not graphene, or lithium iron phosphate, which are much safer. 250 kilowatts, that's just insane. It's 2.5 cars. So I guess if you really need something on the books because there's a project coming, at least go 1 megawatt. With 250 kilowatts, you are going to prevent this town from ever having a cell phone tower backed up with the latest technology. A lot of people that have generators today will be moving to these batteries backup systems. And if you keep it at 250 kilowatts, you're going to kill that from happening. So at least maybe change that to 1 megawatt for now.
I didn't have a question in there, so Mr. Sikowski.
Scott Sikowski, 8 Catherine Street. I happen to work for a small startup which is looking at a different technology for lithium ion for these. And I can tell you that we have a 40 kilowatt system sitting in my place of employment that's in a 30-foot storage container. 30 feet long, 12 feet high, a storage container. It can be a lot bigger than a Tesla. These do take up space, and it's a good idea to have a bylaw to be in front of this so that we don't start having these container fields. They can be large, and so like I said, 40 kilowatts is 30 feet long and 12 feet high. So there's a lot out there.
Thank you.
It's good to be in front of it.
Additional discussion on Article 17. Yes, sir. Okay, I just approached the mic, please.
My question was, I don't know if this is for like just businesses or residentials, or is this for something for like charging your vehicle or something, or having a extra backup for like a generator type?
Great question, Mr. Warren.
Basically what this is that it's an energy storage system. As Mr. Zukowski mentioned, it's a container of sorts, sometimes a double container because they want to make sure that there's no leakage of anything. And the batteries are inside these containers. They're placed on site. They're used for like at a solar field if they're making more power that can go into the grid at a certain time. They can store it in these containers and then put it into the grid at a later time. It's only in industrial, right now we're only allowing it in the industrial districts or at the town refuse disposal district because we're proposing a solar field on the old dump. That's what it's for.
Thank you. Additional discussion for Article 17. Yes.
Steve Wontrobo, 22 Lawrence Road, Dudley, Mass. In reference to the previous speaker's suggestion of raising that rate to 1 megawatt, I believe, I wanted to point out that it actually states, this bylaw is intended to regulate battery energy storage systems greater than 250 kilowatts. So by saying 250 kilowatts, anything above 250 kilowatts gets regulated by the article. So 1 megawatt, as Doc Brown would say, 1.21 gigawatts. Come.
Thank you for the Back to the Future reference. Any additional discussion on Article 17? Yes. I'm telling you, you gotta move that seat down and move the mic back.
So I just want to say that I have in my driveway two EVs, two electric cars, and we're already at past halfway to that limit. And, you know, things are changing really fast. I've got two cars who have a pretty small battery compared to like when someone else was talking about Teslas or something. So 2 cars in your driveway is getting really close to this limit. And if on top of that somebody puts a, you know, one of these Tesla batteries or whatever, you know, the batteries in their garage to back up, you know, for power outages, they fall under this thing. And I just want to say that, you know, not all batteries, you know, saying that they have to be in containers or whatever. I mean, I'm not going to build a container to park my car in at night, for example. So things are changing really fast with, you know, this whole battery and electric things and how they're used and stuff. And I think it's a little bit, we're jumping a little bit fast and writing a zoning thing that's going to prohibit people in Dudley from electrifying their house, for example. And I'd like to say that all the car companies now are making their cars so that they are battery storage things where you can plug 2 cars together and plug that into your house. So combining these batteries isn't just the future. That's what's happening now, and getting up to 250 kilowatt storage in one resident. I'm not even talking a commercial property, but in residence is something that's going to be happening, you know, in the next 10 years to just about everybody. So I'd say this needs to be amended or at least revisited somehow.
Mr. Wayne, I'll let you go.
Okay, so this bylaw would not have any effect on residential areas. It doesn't have any effect on cars. If you have 3 cars and you want to plug them together, it has no effect on you. And as Mr. Latrobe pointed out, it does state it's for systems greater than 250 kilowatts. So if you have a system that's less than 250 kilowatts, you would not have to come to the planning board. The systems that are over 250 kilowatts and are going to be placed in industrial or light industrial districts, you need to come to the planning board. That's all this bylaw is stating.
Thank you. Town planner.
Thank you, Bill Scanlon, Town Planner. I'd just like to reiterate what the Chairman said. These are containers that have batteries in them, and they're intended to store energy during periods of low demand and release the energy during periods of peak demand. They're often associated with solar fields where the energy that's generated from the solar array is stored in these energy containers and then released into the grid when they're needed. So they're a way to minimize the problems with peak demand so that it evens out the distribution of energy into the grid. As the Chairman mentioned, they would only be allowed in industrial districts because they are an industrial type use. They're not intended to regulate automobiles. They are specifically designed to store energy, large amounts of energy, and then release it when needed. They are only allowed in industrial districts where we think it's appropriate for these uses to take place because they can have potential consequences on abutting properties. And we wanted to be sure that they don't affect residential uses by imposing standards such as deep setbacks, requiring landscaping and screening and buffering to prevent unwanted impacts on adjacent residences. So we think this is a way to use some back industrial land which otherwise doesn't have a very good purpose. There's low demand for industry here in the town, and this is a way for landowners to take advantage of a new technology build an expensive system that will provide tax base to the community and at the same time help with the energy needs, not only in Dudley, but in the surrounding region.
Thank you. Additional discussion on Article 17. Mr. Breyer, I'll let you come back up.
Well, with all due respect, that is not what the definition says. I understand you're talking about the megawatt Tesla containers, right? You know, you want them insulated, you want to make sure there's the fire procedures. That is not what your definition here says. And it's not what your definition says for battery energy storage system or energy storage system. And 250 kilowatts is not. I understand what you're trying to do, but the wording is not going to achieve your objective. You're going to stifle backup battery centers. Let's just take Stevens Lennon's. They don't want to do a generator. Let's just say they want to put a battery backup system in there. Can't do it. All right? And as you say, it doesn't affect residential. It does. Because in the use table, it's NP, not permitted. That means not negotiable.
Yeah, Mr. Scanlon, thank you.
So I appreciate your concern, but the bylaw states that only systems greater than 250 kilowatts require site plan approval from the planning board. So a residence, if they wanted to put in a less than 250 kilowatt battery container system, they would be allowed to do so. The bylaw regulates systems greater than 250 kilowatts, which are only permitted in the industrial districts, and it provides a great deal of town oversight to make sure that these are designed properly and provide a benefit to the town and to the neighborhood. So in addition, so what we're talking about here is primarily battery container systems. An industry or a business, if they wanted to, could put in a standalone system that's less than 250 kilowatts, and it would not be prohibited by this bylaw. So many businesses might want to develop such a system to help meet their own energy needs. For example, they might purchase energy at night when energy is less costly, and then use it to supply their business during the daytime when energy is more expensive. In addition, it can help to overcome the threat of power outages, so that if a power outage occurs, they have a backup power supply to help run their business. So it's really intended for large scale, greater than 250 kilowatt power systems to help the town, to help meet the energy needs of the community.
Thank you. Mr. Ritter. Motion to move the question. Seconded. Move Article 17 to a vote as presented by the Planning Board. 1 for yea, 2 for nay. 2/3 majority is required. Motion fails. Article 18, zoning change on Oxford Ave, to see if the town will vote to amend the official Dudley zoning map by changing the zoning district from residential 30 to light industrial 87 for the property shown as lot 153B on the plan entitled A&R Plan of Land for 153 Oxford Avenue, prepared by DC Engineering and Survey Incorporated, dated November 11, 2022, consisting of 11.4522 acres and is on Assessor Map 212-06-001. Said plan is attached as Addendum 1, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
Board of Selectmen defers this article to the petitioner.
Mr. Angelovich.
Good evening. As per Dudley bylaw, it is required that I have a citizen's petition to have a zoning change done on our property at a town meeting. What we did is we own 2 separate parcels of land on Oxford Ave. We sold 11.5 acres from our residential portion to our industrial portion. And we're looking to change that 11.5 acres to industrial to coincide with our existing parcels around it.
Great, thank you. Mr. Horn, does the planning board have a recommendation?
At its April 26, 2023 Planning Board meeting, the board held a required public hearing on the proposed amendment. Upon closing the hearing, the board voted 2 in favor, 2 opposed. Therefore, the board does not have a recommendation on this proposed amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Angelovich. Roll call. You can move.
Oh. How do I do that? I move Article 18 as written.
Very well. Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion for Article 18. You can go ahead, Mr. Angelovich, if you like. You made the motion. Yeah, the petitioner has the floor.
Oh. Questions? Questions?
Okay. Come on down.
Hi, I'm Kristen Marengo, 18 Sunnyside Road. I'm just curious, is it just changing that area of Oxford Ave? Are you looking to have another easement going into the pit
No.
itself? And what about the traffic and all that, like that road? It's pretty bad.
Kind of a, if you have the plan that they provided, Exhibit A. Give it out here. So, if anyone can see this, here's Oxford Ave here. We own all this 85 acres around it, and we own this parcel here. So to kind of make the lot line a little cleaner, we cut off this 11.5 acres and we're trying to move it into our industrial line.
Okay, and what about
It's just,
like the
it's
surrounding?
rock. It all it does is
Right,
have
it's all rock, I know.
big mountain of rock on it that we just want to excavate.
Okay, and but is it going to, are you guys looking to do what you've done down the street where?
No, there'll be no other access into that point. We're keeping that house and the land on the bottom separate.
And the abutters and all of that have all been notified and all, with their discussions about this being changed? Because this does change our environment.
Okay. We didn't notify any of the brothers, but it was posted for a town meeting.
Additional discussion on Article 18. Mr. Flynn.
Just a point, I think when you Patrick Flynn, Lions Road, I believe that when you put the petition on and went before the planning board, a butters notified at that point for a zoning change, which is required by the zoning bylaw. Was that already completed?
The question is, when this went onto the planning board, were abutters
Public
notified?
hearing? Published public hearing? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Robin Watson, Dresser Hill Road. I'm not familiar with Oxford Avenue. You're not talking about Dudley Oxford Road, are you?
No, Oxford Ave is the road that the Boys and Girls Club is on.
Okay.
So we're further
I'm
down
just
closer
curious
to like the
because
Oxford line.
the previous lady that spoke said something about Sunrise Circle, I thought.
Sunnyside, the Sunny.
Sunnyside,
It
is
abuts
that near
Oxford
Pond
Ave.
or Peyton Pond?
No, Sunnyside is up off of Oxford Ave. It's a short little road.
Okay, thank you.
Across from Cemetery Road, correct? Additional discussion on Article 18. Seeing none, move Article 18 to a vote. All in favor, 1. All opposed, 2. This does require a 2/3 majority vote. The motion has failed. Thank you. Article 19. Authorize the Dudley Sewer Management Plan Project to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds the sum of $185,000 or such other sum for the Dudley Sewer Asset Management Plan Project, which is on the Massachusetts 2023 Clean Water State Revolving Fund Assessment Management Planning Project list, and to meet this appropriation, The treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow in accordance with general laws, Chapter 44, Section 7 or 8, or any other enabling authority, and issue bonds or notes therefore under general laws, Chapter 29C, or any other enabling authority, and in connection therewith to enter into a financing agreement and/or security agreement with the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust with respect to such loan and for any federal or state aid available for the projects or for the financing thereof. Furthermore, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into any project regulatory agreements with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, Mass DEP, as necessary. The total project cost of $185,000 is comprised of a $111,000 grant, 60% of the total project cost, which the town will be reimbursed for in 2 payments of approximately $55,000 each at approximately the 50% and 100% project completion stage by Mass DEP and the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. The balance of the project will be comprised of in-kind services provided by town, valued at $37,000, and a cash contribution from the Sewer Enterprise Fund valued at $37,000, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
The Board of Selectmen defers this article to the Water Sewer Commissioners for a recommendation to town meeting.
Mr. Zakowski.
I move that Article 19, I move that Article 19 be approved as printed in the warrant, and to borrow the sum of $185,000 for the purpose of, $185 for the purpose of this article.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion for Article 19.
Okay, the Dudley Sewer Commission wants to, what this will do is will allow us to assess all of our assets, including the pipe, how much pipe we have in the ground, all of our pump stations, everything we have, and aggregate it into one product. It includes GIS mapping and so on. With the state contributions to the program, through this program, it's a net cost to us for $37,000. It'll be borrowed, and then after the reimbursements, it will be a net of $37,000 out of our enterprise fund.
Thank you. Additional discussion for Article 19? Yes.
Yeah, Jerry Frank, Causeway Road, what's the in-kind services provided by the town valued at $37,000?
Okay, the $111,000 is the grant. The in-kind services is personnel from the sewer department, full-time employees, will do some of the legwork. For example, when they're doing the GIS mapping, they'll actually walk out there with the GPS loggers to log where everything is, so that it can be mapped by our engineers. So of the 20% that's not covered by the grant, the 40% that's not covered by the grant, 20% of it is provided by personnel in the department, and then 20% is what we pay.
Additional discussion for Article 19? Seeing none, we'll move Article 19 to a vote. All in favor of the recommendation of the Water Sewer Commission? 1 or 2 is no. Motion passes. Article 20, amend Chapter 255, Section 6, erosion and sediment control waivers of the bylaws, Scrivener error, to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 255, Section 6 due to the Scrivener error by deleting the strike-through and adding the bolded if. In the Commission's opinion, additional time or information is required for review of a waiver request. The Commission may continue consideration of the waiver request to a strike date certain, enter certain date, announced at the meeting. In the event the applicant refuses a continuance or fails to provide the requested information, the waiver request shall be denied or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
I move to approve Article 20 as recommended by the town clerk and as printed in the warrant.
Motion's been made and seconded for Article 20. Discussion. Seeing none, we'll move Article 20 to a vote. All in favor, 1. All opposed, 2. Motion passes. Article 21, Amendment Chapter 128 Animals, Section 128-4, to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 128 Animals, Section 128-4 by deleting the strike-through and adding the bolded. All dogs and cats owned by a resident of the town of Dudley shall be properly vaccinated in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 145B. Unvaccinated dogs and cats acquired or moved into the town of Dudley shall be vaccinated within 30 days or upon reaching the age of 6 months, whichever occurs, strike first, insert last, or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Johnson.
I move to approve Article 21 as printed in the warrant.
Motion's been made and seconded for Article 21. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move Article 21 to a vote. All in favor, aye. 1. All opposed, 2. Motion passes. Article 22, unanimous consent to avoid reading all of the text in Article 22. Anyone opposed? I thank you again. Article 22, amend Chapter 203 Lakes and Ponds, to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 203 Lakes and Ponds by deleting the strike-through and adding the underlined as presented in the warrant article. Mr. Johnson.
I move to approve Article 22 as recommended by the town clerk and as printed in the warrant.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion for Article 22. Seeing none, we'll move Article 22 forward to a vote. All in favor, 1. All opposed, 2. Motion carries. Article 23, citizens petition. Elderly in town need a reward for making this town what it is. Must receive a 50% reduction in real estate taxes. Person must live in town 50 years and be 70 years old. Mr. Johnson.
The Board of Selectmen defers this article to the petition.
Thank you. Mr. Philo.
Oh, Philo?
Philo, sorry.
We have a lot of interest in this petition, but we need a lot more input. So I would like to know how to put it on the shelf until we get more input.
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, this motion, before I tell you how we could do that, it kind of contradicts tax law in Chapter 59. It doesn't allow the town to set this type of opportunity or experience.
So, there's another towns.
Right. I would go ahead and suggest that it be passed over for further information.
Well, if that's the case, there should be some way to still put it on ballot.
If you're requesting a ballot question, we're not going to be able to do that here. But we could pass this over for further information.
Yeah, Mr. Fowler.
Okay, so what you recommending? What are you recommending?
My recommendation would be to go ahead and pass it over for further information.
So move.
Motion's been made, seconded. Any discussion to pass this over for further information? Seeing none, we'll move that recommendation to pass over for further information to a vote. All in favor, 1. All opposed, 2. Motion has passed. Seeing as how there's no other business,
Motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made and seconded. There is no need for discussion on this point. Meeting adjourned.